Chapter 585. Just by looking into each other's eyes. This caused the gray shadow's original madness and greed to turn into the current fear and panic. In the gray shadow's eyes, Dake had turned from a delicious meal to a bloody butcher's knife. It screamed with all its might, venting its fear. Then it suddenly turned around and tried to escape. But there was a giggle that came from the void. Little Dream Demon silently appeared behind him, reaching out with her small antennae to grab his scalp. Naturally, she was just a spirit that was like mist. So it's a soul sucker. Dake was a bit surprised, but his eyes were filled with curiosity. Soul suckers were a common demon in the underground city, but it was Dake's first time encountering one. He still clearly remembered the two soul suckers that Professor Nini had caught for a demonstration. One of them had exploded in anger, while the other had accidentally licked his things and exploded. Since then, he knew that he didn't need to be afraid of soul suckers. He remembered the URL. VIP can't you? 6. He didn't think that there would be a soul sucker that dared to provoke him. I wonder what kind of materials a soul sucker would drop after it dies. Dake's eyes lit up, and his interest grew. Bite me. Little Dream Demon let out a joyful cry. She kneaded the monster into a ball, as if she was kneading dough. Then, she grabbed the sides and pulled outwards, causing the 3 holes on the monster's face to twist and deform. Dake couldn't help but condemn its actions. Look at how uncomfortable it is. Let's send it on its way. In theory, demons in the underground city only had the instincts of demons, but they didn't have intelligence. They weren't real life. Therefore, even the kindest of students would not feel any psychological pressure when hunting magical beasts. Little Dream Demon didn't want to, but it still gave the toy, in its hands, a quick death. Following the death of the Soul Eater, its gray mist-like body dissipated with the wind, leaving not even a trace of it behind. But when Dake showed a disappointed expression, Little Dream Demon reached out and grabbed something transparent. ********. Hee. Dake couldn't help but look closer, but he found that the transparent thing was only the size of a loach. He didn't know what it was. Speaking of which, Professor Nini didn't say what materials a soul sucker would drop after it dies. Is it because normal people can't collect them? Dake thought as he reached out his finger to touch it. Then his finger went through it. It was clear that the transparent thing was also a spirit. He couldn't help but feel troubled. If it was a spirit, he didn't bring any special storage tools, such as the small bottle that Professor Kazair used to store the soul powder. If he didn't have that special tool, the spirit would have disappeared. In fact, the only reason he was able to capture it was because the Dream Demon was also a spirit-type magic guide fairy. I can't let the soul sucker hold. Even if you keep holding on to it, you will. Demons can you? The Dream Demon nodded vigorously. Then, as if she was presenting a treasure, she slapped the transparent object into one of the red beads on her neck. Then she jumped up excitedly. Dake immediately understood that the soul sucker was storing the soul sucker in the gem of fear. The gem of fear could absorb the emotions of fear and convert it into magical storage. Even if the soul sucker was stored in the card, the magical storage wouldn't disappear. It was a very special type. Now that the gem of fear was used to store the soul sucker, it seemed to make sense. Dake made a prompt decision and began to try. Half a minute later, he got the result. It worked. He didn't use the eye of truth to look and just let the soul sucker hide it. He would think about it later. Let's go into the secret room first. Just now he had found the mechanism. When he pressed it again, a crack appeared on the wall 1 meter away. With great experience, the lion beast reached out and pushed, only to find that it was indeed a revolving door. It said a few words to Dake and went in first. After confirming that it was safe, it came back and brought Dake in. The soul sucker had experienced the same situation many times. Occasionally, there would be magical creatures hiding in the secret room, but it was dealt with in time. This time, the secret room was relatively safe and it moved quickly. However, after Dake entered, he found that the layout of the secret room was different from all the secret rooms he had been to before. First, it wasn't a square room, but a rare circular one. The entire secret room could be seen at a glance. In the middle of the room, there was a raised round table with a candlestick on it. When someone entered, the flame on the candlestick would ignite spontaneously, illuminating the entire secret room. At the foot of the round table, there were delicate patterns like petals blooming in all directions, forming an extremely beautiful composition. This was completely different from the other secret rooms that had always been plain and simple. The walls of this secret room were also carved with exquisite patterns. It was the same color as the patterns on the floor, a pure combination of black and white. Walking into this secret room was like walking into a palace of art. If one wasn't careful, they would feel dizzy. Of course, there was no treasure chest in this secret room. Dake stood at the door of the secret room for a long time, but he still didn't know what to do with this secret room. Except for the candlestick on the round table in the middle, it seemed that there was nothing else to take. After standing like this for a long time, his eyes were gradually attracted by the candlestick. His eyes reflected the flickering candlelight. Suddenly, a flash of light appeared. Dake suddenly remembered the secret room that AI Ma mentioned. It seemed to be the same. In that secret room, there was only an oil lamp in addition to the murals. When AI Ma took the oil lamp, it triggered the hidden space. After that, Dake, Deanna, and Luosi entered by mistake and obtained the first, holy sword. Speaking of which, Dake was able to enter the hidden space thanks to AI Ma. Although the secret room in front of him was completely different from AI Ma's description in every detail. However, it gave him a similar feeling. He suddenly pondered. When he was thinking, the magic guide fairies also quieted down and didn't disturb him. Outside the secret room, monsters were attracted by the screams of the Soul Eater. Little Dream Demon, who was squatting outside, suddenly had her eyes lit up. She didn't report and just floated toward the group of monsters. When she entered the ghost state, the monster's claws and teeth were completely ineffective against her. And the monsters in the first 10 floors didn't have spells, so they couldn't do anything to her. She approached the monsters and let out a bell-like laughter. She wandered among them and played with them, making the monsters' eyes scarlet and constantly let out low barks. In the end, the little demon took the responsibility of being the sentinel. After learning the situation from the little demon, the Dilu beast put down the backpack and stepped out of the secret room. It stretched out its right hand and the single sword scabbard automatically flew over. Cat and sword became one. The battle outside the secret room, the meditation inside the secret room. A complete composition of movement and stillness was formed. The Dilu beast rushed into the group of monsters. The cat's eyes shone in the darkness. The snow-white sword burst out from the sword and instantly danced, fighting with the monsters. And in the secret room, Dake finally figured out a link. He stepped on the black and white pattern on the ground step by step, and safely arrived at the edge of the round table. Then he reached out and grabbed the candlestick on the round table. When his 5 fingers closed, he already held the candlestick in his hand. Then he slightly raised it and lifted it. The candlestick flickered. The hidden space didn't immediately open in front of him. But according to AI Ma, they didn't notice the hidden space opening. Maybe the outside had already been taken into the hidden space. Just as Dake was thinking, the round table in the middle of the secret room suddenly lit up. The fire couldn't gather on the candlestick, so it could only spread down the groove of the round table. Then it followed the white lines on the ground and jumped out. Dake quickly jumped out of the range of the fire. In the blink of an eye, he saw that the floor of the secret room was lit up with a flame array. The array burned for a moment. Then it spread from the edge of the wall, instantly igniting the pattern on the wall. The entire secret room was lit up with a raging fire. The crazily jumping flames were reflected in his eyes, making him fearful. The lion beast suddenly moved and blocked in front of Dake. Dake was still observing with rapt attention. The flames looked fierce, but there was no smoke at all. And there was no need to be afraid of a fire without smoke. He stood at a place where the flames couldn't reach, so he could see all the movements of the flames. This was a very rare opportunity. He quietly watched the flames continue to burn, wanting to see what it could burn. It can't keep going. This doesn't make sense. As soon as this thought came to his mind, the intensity of the flames suddenly increased. The tongues of fire that rose from the ground even licked through the ceiling. Then, the ceiling lit up with a fire array that corresponded to the floor, connecting them together from top to bottom. Boom! Suddenly a voice came from above. The flame array on the ceiling burned through the ceiling, and a red light shot out from above. Then, a central line suddenly appeared, cutting the entire ceiling into two halves. When Dake came back to his senses, the ceiling of the secret room was suddenly opened. Dake suddenly raised his head, and an inverted world appeared in his vision. Countless inverted candlesticks were reflected in his eyes, and the flickering candle flames were neatly swaying. A hidden space. Although it wasn't a hidden space that reached the depths of the underground city, there was no doubt that it was an existence that surpassed the secret room. Lion Beast. No, wait, where's the little devil beast? Dake immediately called the Lion Beast, but then he thought that the little devil beast was more suitable, but he found that it wasn't by his side. It's outside dealing with the demons, the Lion Beast calmly said. Is that so? Dake turned around and found that the Dilu Beast wasn't by his side, so he simply pushed open the door and looked at the situation outside. He saw that among the corpses of the demons, the Dilu Beast was proudly standing. Its snow-white fur was especially eye-catching in the dark environment. Little Devil Beast. After finding that there weren't many demons coming, Dake called the Little Devil Beast from the atmosphere group in. When the Little Devil Beast entered the secret room, its scalp went numb. Although the ceiling of the secret room was open, the flames were not extinguished. Although they didn't smoke, the temperature was still very high, making it hard for people to approach. But since it was called in by Dake, the Little Devil Beast already knew what it was about to face. Although it had a bitter expression, it still flapped its wings and flew over. Let's see if the flames are real, Dake reminded it. The Little Devil Beast carefully used its wings to touch the flames, and then with a wah sound it pulled back. However, there weren't any burn marks on its wings. It slowly opened its eyes and secretly glanced at its wings. It quickly said, conditioned reflex, conditioned reflex. There were no burn marks, so it couldn't be burned. Other than the temperature of the flames being higher than the surface of its body, everything else was just an illusion. The Little Devil Beast suddenly became bold. Without waiting for Dake's command, it suddenly flew into the flames, and then rushed into the ceiling of the secret room. In an instant, its body was hanging upside down, and it felt like it was upside down as it began to fall. Looking at the burning candlesticks below it, it quickly reversed its direction and flew down, finally breaking free from the shackles of gravity. Thanks to its ability to fly, it was able to adjust like a child who just learned how to swim. How is it? Dake raised his voice and asked. Gravity, the focus is reversed. The Little Devil Beast said loudly. As expected? Dake thought and said, once you get used to it, you can go in and see if there are any treasures like treasure chests or something. The Little Devil Beast's eyes lit up, and it immediately adjusted its posture, so that its head was down and its feet were up, fitting into the inverted world. Then it couldn't wait to search the hidden space full of candlesticks. This hidden space was connected to an unknown level of the underground city. The size of the space was about the size of a basketball court, and of course, no one knew if there were any hidden passages. The little demonic beast first roughly circled the area, then hurriedly scurried back to report the situation to Dark. Other than the candlesticks floating in the air, the space inside was snow-white, and there was only a small gap in the wall. The Little Devil Beast boldly guessed that there was a treasure chest behind the door. Then it volunteered to go in and take a look. Dake thought about it again and again, and it volunteered 3 times. Dake had no choice but to let it take the risk alone. Thus, the Little Devil Beast flapped its wings and flew to the front of the wall. But just as it used its claws to grab the door, the candlesticks behind it that were supposed to be inanimate suddenly began to move. The originally slightly swaying flame suddenly soared, as if a long hair was fluttering in the wind. A pair of pitch-black eyes slowly opened within the flame, and stared at the back of the Little Devil Beast. The Little Devil Beast felt a chill run down its spine, and it subconsciously turned its head back. The flame on the candlesticks was still exploding, and when it saw it, it was already like a long whip, fiercely lashing out. The little demonic beast immediately let out a shriek. In the nick of time, it erupted with unprecedented reaction speed and dodged the flaming whip with a wonderful posture. Then, it fled to the ceiling that was connected to the secret room in a panic. Chirp, 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 chirp. Deadly 13 chirps. Whoosh! Suddenly, there was the sound of wind exploding, and the silver-white dragon whelp suddenly passed through the interface that connected the two spaces. With just a turn, it adapted to the world where gravity was reversed, and then it flew past the extremely fierce little devil beast, fiercely crashing into the candlesticks that were chasing after it. Bang! With a loud bang, the candlesticks were smashed apart by the blue-eyed dragon whelp, and the flame on the top of the candlesticks was on the verge of dying out. Meow! The blue-eyed dragon whelp proudly let out a long howl. The little devil beast suddenly turned its head, and its face was full of shock. "You're a dragon!" But the blue-eyed dragon whelp didn't care about this. The Shungmalian Academy had a no-fly rule, and it was too big to hide, so it could only secretly fly 2 rounds at night. Now that it finally had this opportunity, why didn't it fly to its heart's content? It passed over the candlesticks, and the hurricane that it created almost extinguished the candlesticks. After 1 round, all the candlesticks were stimulated, and the flames rose sharply. Looking at the gradually chaotic scene in the hidden space, Day couldn't help but cover its forehead and let out a painful cry. The magic elf had its own intelligence and had its own ideas. It could always cause some trouble when he was unprepared. Now that all the candlesticks in the hidden space had awakened, and according to the nature of this kind of demon, they most likely had something like a combination skill. His judgment was very accurate. The blue-eyed dragon whelp's natural dragon aura made these hundreds of candlesticks feel a great threat. As soon as they awakened, they moved closer to the first candlesticks that had awakened, and densely arranged themselves into a square. The candlesticks quickly merged with the candlesticks, and in the blink of an eye, it became an extremely huge flame. The blue-eyed dragon whelp also instantly felt that something was wrong, and hurriedly stopped beside the little devil beast, blinking its big eyes and looking at the huge candlesticks, with an innocent look that said, "This has nothing to do with me." The little devil beast couldn't help but droop its eyelids, and said, "This is the end." The blue-eyed dragon whelp, meow, the little devil beast, "Don't pretend to be a cat." Blue-eyed dragon whelp, light of spirit hall. Dake's command came in time. The blue-eyed dragon whelp spun in the air, and released the light of spirit hall. Holy white light erupted from its dragon wings, and quickly gathered on top of its head, condensing into a blazing ball of light like the sun. Snow-white feathers scattered from the sky. The sudden explosion of the ball of light caused the surrounding environment to rapidly change. The blue-eyed dragon whelp bathed in the brilliance, and it was so comfortable that it squinted its eyes. But what welcomed it was a flame whip that stretched out from the huge candlesticks. The flame whip formed the shape of a giant python, and it opened its huge mouth to swallow it. The blue-eyed dragon whelp's eyes flashed, and it instantly became serious. As a dragon species, it wasn't afraid of flames. It even faced the flame head-on and rushed up. The little devil beast was left behind in an instant, and it could only watch as the blue-eyed dragon whelp and the flame python launched an intense attack in defense. The blue-eyed dragon whelp's wings were as sharp as knives, and the wind blades that blew tore the flame apart. But the candlesticks flickered slightly, and it was filled up again. With just a glance, it knew that it couldn't extinguish the flame python with its own ability, so it attacked the main body. Boom! The flame python couldn't stop the blue-eyed dragon whelp's attack at all. The outer candlesticks were cut into 2 by the dragon's wings, and the upper half of the burning candlesticks fell, melting into milky white wax on the ground. More and more candlesticks were cut, and the wax piled up on the ground became more and more. When it accumulated to a certain point, the piled-up wax wriggled into a milky white giant beast, and it roared angrily at the top. Dake Dimming, who was in the secret room and watching the whole battle from an inverted perspective, finally remembered what kind of monster this was. A single candlestick was called Candle Spirit, and the giant beast formed from the wax was called Candle Monster. It was a common monster below the 20th level of the underground city. They were just small monsters that played the role of slime, but they could pose a fatal threat to people. But since it's a monster below the 20th level, then this hidden space should also be below the 20th level. If I can conquer it and get the treasure chest hidden in it. Slurp, Dake quickly pursed his lips. If he could get something more valuable than trash slime from the treasure chest, then he would really make a killing. The strength of a single candle spirit is about 3 stars, and hundreds of them together have the strength of 5 stars. The candle monster that is born also depends on the amount of wax, and its specific strength is between 4 stars and 6 stars. With the strength of the blue-eyed dragon whelp, it's enough to deal with it. Just like what Senior Lydia said, let the magic fairy move its body more. Don't stay in the club classroom all day, eat and sleep and eat. Dake put his hands together and watched patiently. The biggest weakness of the blue-eyed dragon whelp was that it lacked enough attack means. It almost didn't have any killing moves that could be used in battle, and the only dragon's reverse scale would cause its mind to be confused. If it wanted to continuously win in battles of the same level, it needed to be proficient in battle skills and a brain that could adapt to the situation. For example, jumping over the flame python and directly attacking the candle spirit's body was a good choice. But the candle monster and the candle spirit were different. They had great resistance to physical attacks and were relatively more difficult to deal with. What will it do? Dake was a little expectant. However, after the blue-eyed dragon whelp cut off a large number of candle spirits, the candle monster seized the opportunity while it was diving down. The candlelight monster's body suddenly expanded, like a lump of mud. It clung onto the wings of the young cyanide dragon. Then its huge body actually leaped up and pressed down on the young cyanide dragon's back, directly pressing it down from the air to the ground. In the blink of an eye, the situation changed abruptly. The blue-eyed dragon whelp's body was stuck by the candle monster's wax like a fly stuck by glue on a fly board. No matter how it struggled, it couldn't break free. Seeing this, the candle spirits gathered together instantly shouted. The burning candle flames jumped wildly, and the flame python formed by the candle flames suddenly turned its head and swooped down on the blue-eyed dragon whelp that was trapped on the ground. Boom! The flame python held the blue-eyed dragon whelp's head in its mouth, causing the wax around its head to melt into a more viscous hot liquid. The hot liquid seeped into the blue-eyed dragon whelp's dragon scales through the gaps. Although the damage wasn't great, it made its whole body itchy. It immediately pretended to have a teary look and struggled to look up at its master across the space. It was trying to melt his cold heart and let it evolve into a blue-eyed subwhite dragon. For fun. But Dake wasn't fooled by it. Holding the blue-eyed dragon whelp magic card, he was very clear that the condition of the blue-eyed dragon whelp was still very good. Finally, when the blue-eyed dragon whelp's head was about to be stuck by the candle monster's wax, a scarlet-red light appeared in the depths of its eyes. Sure kill skill. Dragon's reverse scale. The blue-eyed dragon whelp, who had activated the dragon's reverse scale on its own, had a sudden surge in power. It suddenly broke free from the wax on its body, spread its dragon wings and rose from the ground. Roar! The dragon's roar resounded through the space. The blue-eyed dragon whelp's attack power had increased greatly in its furious state. It tore apart the candle monsters that wanted to entangle it in an instant. Then, it pounced on the candlesticks above its head and smashed the candlesticks into pieces in an even crazier and more violent manner. After 3 minutes of fighting, the blue-eyed dragon whelp was released from the dragon's reverse scale state, and its eyes quickly regained clarity. In front of it, there wasn't a single candle spirit left. On the other hand, the candle monster was still dead but not dead. The blue-eyed dragon whelp landed and stomped on the candle monster twice, finally trampling it to death. Then, it raised its head and continued to look at Dake, finally seeing a look of approval in his eyes. The blue-eyed dragon whelp raised its claws and scratched its head, then walked towards the wall with a gap in the door. And when the little demon beast saw that the battle had ended, it immediately flew over. The blue-eyed dragon whelp touched the wall twice, then pushed hard and pushed open a door. Because it was a single door, it took a lot of effort to force its way in. Then, when the little demon beast wanted to follow in, it suddenly stuck its huge head out and pushed the little demon beast back. Then it let out an excited cry towards the top of its head. The little demon beast glared at it in annoyance and squeezed in through the gap. As soon as it entered, it saw the treasure chests hidden inside. There were a total of 3. Wow! It immediately flew to the blue-eyed dragon whelp's head, stuck its head out and cheered. As the candle spirits and candle monsters were all killed, the flames in the secret room were finally extinguished. Dake took out the flight incantation and flew to the ceiling curiously, then flew in from the boundary between the two spaces. Before his body had completely passed through, the surface was covered with a layer of transparent film. Until he had completely passed through, that layer of film then cracked. Then the gravity was reversed and he was pushed by the flight incantation and the acceleration of gravity. Then he fell head first. He hurriedly used the flight incantation to change direction, completing the exchange of the direction of his head and feet, and regaining his balance before he fell to the ground. On the ground outside the door, there was a large amount of wax and candle wick left. Each candle wick was emitting a faint light, obviously a usable material. But there were too many candle wick, and he couldn't choose at the moment, so he directly used the flight incantation to cross over and fly into the room inside. Just as the little demon beast said, there were a total of 3 treasure chests inside. This was the first time he found multiple treasure chests in one place after he took the bronze and silver treasure chests from the abdomen of the Sphinx bronze statue. And there were a total of 3 treasure chests. Important things to say again, there were a total of 3 treasure chests here. Break the lock, Dake said excitedly. The blue-eyed dragon whelp walked to the front of the treasure chests and broke the lock one by one. Let's start from the leftmost one. Dake rubbed his hands, grabbed the lid of the chest, pulled it up forcefully, and lifted the entire lid. The dust was shaken off, and the treasure chest was filled with candles. Dake was shocked, and he almost thought that they were all candle spirits. But after careful observation, he found that these were magic candles with special effects. He had seen many similar candles. The old nobles who pursued the atmosphere liked to light up a magic candle with a concentration effect in their study room, and read ancient books in the faint yellow light. To be honest, it was indeed artistic. But the box of candles in front of him wasn't that effect, but the purple wick candle, with an illusion effect. After lighting the purple wick candle, people could see the illusion they wanted to see from the candle flame, which was very magical. Dake counted. There were a total of 12 thick and long, purple wick candle. But it was slightly troublesome to take them away. Let's look at the rightmost chest. He calmed down and turned to the right to open the treasure chest. There were also 12 magic candles in this chest, but they weren't the purple wick candle, but the pink wick candle that could bring joy. As for its effect, anyone who knew would know. Dake stood up and looked at the last treasure chest. It can't be a candle too, right? He couldn't help but say. Although the purple wick candle and pink wick candle each had their uses, they were still considered luxury goods, and their raw materials were not precious, so only the 2 types of candles could be used. Thinking of this, Dake suddenly had an idea. Why don't I take the candles and take them away? Forget it, it's too troublesome. He shook his head, and then opened the treasure chest in the middle. The third treasure chest finally didn't contain candles. Dake stared at the treasure in the treasure chest, and he couldn't help but be pleasantly surprised. He saw that there was a magic book hidden in the treasure chest. The so-called magic book was a book used to record magic. Because the knowledge of magic was too vast, relatively famous magic would require an entire book to record. And some high-level magic books could help with learning, allowing mages to easily learn the magic recorded in the book. Dake had once found a magic book called Blood Sacrifice in the Goblin's ancient bookstore, and it had indeed helped him a lot. I hope it's a magic that I can master. Dake reached out his hand and grabbed the magic book. But before his fingers touched it, he suddenly became alert and called the little demon beast, "You do it." The little demon beast lowered its head to look at the book, and suddenly used the tip of its wings to touch it, and then immediately retracted. A red light flashed on the book, and the little demon beast's wings were already smoking. There really is a seal. Dake's eyes moved slightly, and he praised himself for being alert. But what should he do next? He thought for a moment, and then subconsciously touched the society card. The ice wizard beast, that evolved from the ancient beast, might know how to remove the magic seal. But he quickly realized that he couldn't summon the ancient beast. Then I can only do this. Dake thought for a moment, and then summoned the little dream demon from outside. The little dream demon floated around as soon as it entered the room, and Dake had to grab the back of its neck. He pointed at the magic book and said, "Can you use your superpower to move it?" The little dream demon's eyes lit up, and immediately used her superpower on the magic book. The magic book lightly shook, and then suddenly burst into flames. The little dream demon was shocked by the flames. Date calmly said, "Don't be afraid, continue to use your superpower to suppress the flames." "Bite me." The dream demon immediately did as she was told, and quickly found joy in it. Her ultimate skill, telekinesis, allowed her to use her superpower to move objects, but to put it bluntly, it was just exerting force on the object. And after the magic book was exerted, the seal would naturally be triggered. Normally, there were two reasons why a magic book was sealed. One was because it was dangerous, and the other was because it was too dangerous. The first reason was to prevent normal people from touching it, or to prevent it from being easily stolen. The second reason was to completely seal the magic book, so that it would never see the light of day. The strength of the magic book's seal should be leaning towards the first reason. It wasn't very strong, and the little dream demon's telekinesis could easily wipe it clean. In fact, that was the case. After 10 minutes, the magic book was no longer on fire, and the dream demon easily lifted it up. Dake then reached out to take it. The cover of the magic book was slightly hot, with the residual heat of the flames. There was a very normal hexagram engraved on the cover, and there was no magic name written on it. He flipped open the cover, and it was still the same. He flipped to the next page, and there was a magic name and a line of words. Magic fire. The magic flame burns fiercely, and no one knows where it will go. Magic flame? Dake thought carefully, and subconsciously flipped to the next page, but he was shocked to find that the next page seemed to be stuck, and he couldn't open it at all. After a short hesitation, he injected magic into his fingertip. Bang! An extremely soft explosion suddenly sounded, and the place where his fingertip touched the page suddenly burst into flames. He subconsciously let go of his hand, and the flames on his fingertip disappeared after a few seconds. After that, Dake looked at the magic book in his hand in a completely different way. Without a doubt, this was a high-level magic book that could guide a magician to learn magic. Pah! He closed the book, and suppressed the surprise in his heart. Almost at the next moment, Greedy Slime 2 suddenly widened its eyes. Oh asterisk. It was so excited that it let out a puff sound. Dake didn't react for a moment, but the Dilu beast and the lion beast suddenly pricked up their ears and their expressions changed. After the number of magic elves with brave quality increased from 1 to 2 and then to 3, Holy Sword was undoubtedly in a situation where the supply couldn't meet the demand. Even if single scabbard could evolve into double scabbard, it could only last for 15 minutes and couldn't be divided into 3. It was the same for this trip to the underground city. The two magic elves could only use Holy Sword alternately, which was extremely inconvenient. Therefore, they continued to have 1 or even 2 Holy Swords to fill the demand. You found the Holy Sword? The little demon beast flew onto the back of Greed 2. It was also very sensitive. Of course, it didn't like Holy Sword. Only then did Dake react. His mouth, which was already unable to close, suddenly revealed a look of ecstasy. Greed +1. The next moment, he suddenly pursed his lips and used Dark Spirit spell to empty his mind and forcefully suppress the desire of greed. Then he suddenly gasped and said, "Lion Beast, carry the slime." The lion beast immediately put Greed 2 on its head and carried it like a cloak. Then, under the guidance of Greed 2, it started to walk. Dake's group had a stronger purpose this time, and was more determined. The spirit illusion bug flew above their heads, illuminating the darkness. The single scabbard floated in the air. The little demon beast flew out from time to time to scout the way. The Dilu beast and Meow Meow walked beside Dake, one on the left and one on the right. Little Dream Demon floated back and forth, livening up the atmosphere. They were extremely fast and cleanly cleared the magic elves blocking their way. Soon they were close to Greed 2's sensing area. 10,000 words, which is the same as 5 chapters of other books. 210/233. Guaranteed monthly votes, guaranteed blade. Chapter 586. Beast King Fist. The lion beast roared, and the energy wave it emitted blasted the two demons that were madly pouncing at it into powder. Then it strode forward. Greedy Slime 2 lay on top of his head and kept calling out to him, instructing him to change direction. Dake followed behind. He could clearly hear that Greedy Slime 2's calls were getting more and more urgent. This meant that the treasure emitting the aura of the Holy Sword was right in front of him. Before entering the underground city, he had set his goal of finding the Holy Sword. However, it was only a small goal, and he didn't have the conviction to find it. This was because he didn't really need the Holy Sword. After all, he wasn't a hero. Of course, if he could find the Holy Sword, he would be very happy. Therefore, tonight's trip was a pleasant surprise. However, after the excitement, Dake quickly calmed down. It wasn't easy to obtain the first Holy Sword, and it was extremely dangerous. Remember this. https://m VIP can't you? VIP even if he had the dream demon. If there were multiple demons that he couldn't deal with, then even same fate would lose its meaning. I wonder if the Holy Sword this time is also in the hidden space? I hope it won't be too difficult. While thinking, Dake suddenly looked up and noticed that the lion beast suddenly stopped at the corner. He immediately asked, "What's wrong?" The lion beast frowned and hesitated. "Maybe it's already here?" "Really?" Dake's expression changed slightly as he quickened his steps to its side. Peeking out from the corner, a huge stone door hidden in the darkness suddenly appeared in his sight. The stone door was over 10 meters tall, and there were extremely complicated carvings on the door. However, due to the dim light, it was a bit blurry. The stone door was extremely thick, and there was a gap in the middle, but it wasn't enough for people to pass through. Dake couldn't help but frown. Because such a huge door that appeared in the maze, it most likely led to the boss room. However, speaking of the boss of the 10th floor of the underground city, he had already given out a mission to clear it last week, and the person who accepted the mission was Senior Mary. Did it refresh a week later? Speaking of which, the coordinates on the report are. Dake's expression suddenly changed, and he took out the magic needle to calculate. A few minutes later, his expression gradually turned ugly. The coordinates in the dungeon were calculated according to the direction of the mana marker. Although the location of the safe zone where the magic marker was located would change due to the terrain refresh, the calculation method remained the same. If his deduction wasn't wrong, the stone door in front of him should be very close to the coordinates described in the intelligence report. Considering the calculation error, it was not a problem to say that it was the same coordinates. In other words, after going around in circles, I still ended up here. But the boss room that Senior Mary described is clearly behind the metal door. It's different from the situation we're in now. Last week, this week. Assuming that the terrain of the 10th floor has changed due to the respawn mechanism, then the relative positions of the bosses should have changed as well. At the end of the day, what is the probability that the coordinates of the boss rooms are the same? How did the other party know the coordinates a week ago? Relying on divination? Dake's brain spun quickly. He had no idea what the other party's goal was. He couldn't tell if it was good or bad. However, if the other party's information was only the coordinates of the 10th floor boss last week, then the probability of today being a coincidence wasn't low. On the contrary, if the other party's information was the coordinates of the 10th floor boss this week, then the possibility of the other party having a powerful diviner was very high. Of course, there was another possibility. That was, the other party had grasped a key factor that could determine the location of the 10th floor boss. He didn't know it through divination, but because of the existence of a key factor, he knew from the beginning that the 10th floor boss would still be here. Although it was inconceivable, Dake was knowledgeable after all, and he could calculate all kinds of possibilities. Moreover, he could indeed guess what the so-called key factor was. Hypothetically, if the hypothesis was true, the so-called key factor was most likely the Holy Sword. Because the Holy Sword was too special. The Greedy Slime 2 just happened to smell the Holy Sword here. That was why Dake had this association. But if he used this as a basis to make a deduction, could it be that the other party gave me the information because of the Holy Sword? That's not right. If it's because of the Holy Sword, shouldn't the information be given to the hero's son? Dake couldn't help but hesitate. Before he figured out the other party's goal, he couldn't make a move. However, the holy sword was right in front of him, and it was only guarded by the 10th floor boss. It could be said that it was within his reach. Was he going to give up because of this baseless guess? Obviously, it was impossible. Speaking of which, in the original game, since the players could control the main character to defeat the Demon King in the Academy, then there should be many holy swords in the Academy that could purify the hero's bloodline. Although I haven't played the game, the holy sword might be a way to increase the player's stickiness and interest. The underground city, the secret tunnel, the forest, these large-scale scenes should have the holy sword hidden. If that's the case, then it's possible that there's someone who has the information about the holy sword and pass the information to the main character to guide him to collect the holy sword. So back to the topic, shouldn't the person give the information to the main character, the hero's son, who needs the holy sword to purify his bloodline, the White Gouda? Could it be that he got the wrong person? Dake couldn't help but laugh at this thought. He shook his head and looked at the huge stone door that seemed to blend into the darkness. There was a saying that went, different situations call for different actions. No matter what, he couldn't let go of such a huge treasure. But before he entered, he had to make some preparations. 2 minutes later, Dake led the magic elves to the stone door and carefully searched for a while. After confirming that there were no other traps, he stored the degenerated trash slime back into the magic card. He then put his hand into his card bag and started to think carefully. There are 2 types of rooms for tier bosses. The most common one is a big room where you can see the boss as soon as you enter. The other type has a complicated structure like a large-scale dungeon. After entering, you have to go through many levels before you can see the final boss. Unlike in the game, there's a chance that the tier boss will be awakened early. If you can't kill it in time, it might even rush out of the room and threaten the adventurers on the same level. In order to deal with the latter situation, it's best not to use too much force before opening the door. Anyway, let's check the cooldown of the Great Sin card. Other than Greed 3, the other Great Sin cards can be used. Above Tier 2, there's an Uncontrollable Bliss 3 Moon, 2 Controllable Bliss 3 Moon, a Standard Bliss 3 Pride 3, and a Pride 3. First of all, Pride is a unique strategic weapon, so it can't be used casually. I can use the Uncontrollable Bliss 3 Moon with Pride Eye, and the target will be... Dake raised his head and looked at the little dream demon who was playing in the air. Half a minute later, a dream demon with a reserved look appeared in front of him. It floated quietly in the air. Its head was shaped like a magical girl wearing a wizard hat, and its body was covered in a dark blue wizard robe. In front of its flat chest, there were 3 red gems that emitted a powerful magical aura. A 5-star dream demon and a 5-star lion beast should be enough to deal with it. Dake thought for a moment and felt that it wasn't safe, so he summoned Kettle to his side. He then took a deep breath and said, "Lion Beast, open the door." The lion beast freed its hands and pressed on the stone door, suddenly bursting with all its strength. Rumble. The sound of a millstone moving came from inside the stone door. The stone door on the right was slowly pushed open by the lion beast. The inside of the stone door was pitch black. When the dim light from outside shone in, there was a sudden rustling sound. The lion beast immediately furrowed its brows and cautiously looked inside. The white light released by the spirit illusion bug shone on a square meter of stone slabs that were neatly pieced together. Between the gaps of the stone slabs, there was a red liquid that emitted white smoke. A wave of steam instantly rushed towards them. They then looked to the side. There were 2 rows of stone statues, separated by 1 stone slab. They were arranged in a row that extended into the depths of the darkness. And the commotion just now came from those stone statues. "Prepare for battle," the lion beast suddenly shouted. A moment later, the 2 sides of the hall suddenly lit up. The torches hanging on the walls spontaneously lit up, and the exuberant flames lit up the entire hall. Looking inside the stone door, there were more than 40 stone slabs. Then there was a flight of stairs that led up to a square platform. However, there was no tier boss sitting on the throne on the high platform. There was only a transparent jar filled with red liquid. The red liquid in the jar was boiling non-stop, and the red steam that came out of it flowed through a tube in the middle. Then the tube bent backwards and pierced into the wall. Clearly, there was another space behind the wall. Looks like it's a checkpoint boss room. Dake quickly came to this conclusion. Almost at the same time, the sound of a millstone could be heard. The huge stone door began to close automatically. Dense cracks appeared on the stone statues on both sides of the hall, and steam rose from them. Rumble. The door slammed shut. A stone statue on each side completely cracked open. A demon with a body as red as magma rushed out of the shattered stone slabs, roaring. Blazing red demon. Dake immediately recognized the origins of these two demons. He was immediately on guard and hurriedly said, 4-star demon, blazing red demon. Fire and rock dual attributes, elemental type. Be careful. The magic guide fairies, who already had the basic knowledge, were immediately on guard. Even the indifferent Meow Meow opened its eyes, its expression grave. Elemental type demons were one of the most difficult demons to deal with. They were almost impossible to kill. Their cores had to be found and crushed. Moreover, fire elemental type demons usually had long-range explosive fire spells. On the other hand, rock elemental seeds could be used to enhance rock armor, greatly increasing one's defense. Undying high explosive power and strong defense. This was a 4-star demon, blazing red demon. If one didn't have a high enough defense, just touching the skin of the blazing red demon would burn them. Magic guide fairies like Meow Meow had very poor compatibility with the blazing red demon. Catch! Dake thought for a moment, then took out the Gale dagger, hanging on his thigh, and threw it over. Meow. Meow Meow immediately caught the dagger, and nimbly twirled it around its fingers a few times. Although it was only a 3-star magic guide fairy, its attack power had already reached 3-star perfection. With the Gale dagger in hand, dealing with 1 or 2 blazing red demons wasn't difficult. At the same time, the lion pulled out the lone sword scabbard from its sheath. The Diru beast pulled out the dragon tooth sword, that might or might not have been forged from a dragon tooth from its back. Then, it took off all the bags on its body and placed them in the middle of a stone slab. Then it bent down and exerted force with its feet, shooting out like an arrow. There were a total of 40 stone statues on the field. Now 2 of them had already revived. The Diru beast chose the right side, so the lion naturally charged to the left. The battle instantly started. Although the dragon tooth sword, in the Diru beast's hand, could be considered sharp, it couldn't compare to the holy sword, the lone sword scabbard. After it rushed over, it tried to cut the blazing red demon in half. However, the dragon tooth sword was only able to cut half an inch in before it was blocked by the hard stone shell. Then, the blazing red demon's body suddenly emitted a red light. Blazing flames came out from the cracks in the stone shell, and sprayed towards the Diru beast. The Diru beast raised its eyebrows and instantly exploded with power. It swung its right arm that was holding the sword, and sent the heavy blazing red demon flying. Meow. It sneered and rushed forward again. The core of the blazing red demon was exposed when the red light burst out. It was located above its navel, and the red core kept shining. The Diru beast chased after it and pierced the red core with its sword. Boom. There was almost no gap. The moment the core was pierced, the blazing red demon exploded on the spot. The Diru beast's eyes widened. At the critical moment, it abandoned the dragon tooth sword and retreated a few meters with incredible speed. In its vision, the blazing rock red devil exploded into a ball of flames. The dragon tooth sword that pierced its body was also blown away. Then 2 more blazing red demons came out from the neighboring stone statues in front of the Diru beast. On the other side, the lion beast, on the other hand, had completed its first kill in a clean manner. Then, without hesitation, it rushed to the next stone statue. Even if the blazing red demon that was hiding in the stone statue had not crawled out, reality wasn't a game. No one would wait for you to slowly walk through the revival scene. The lion beast held the holy sword in its hand and swept through the stone statues, instantly killing them. But after it had killed nearly 10 stone statues, the remaining stone statues broke out of their shells at the same time. They seemed to feel threatened, or perhaps the death of their companions angered them. The moment the blazing red demons broke out of their shells, they opened their arms and roared at the sky. The flames that erupted from their cores danced wildly. Red rocks began to spread from the bottom of their feet and covered their entire bodies in the blink of an eye. They wore the rock armor, and flames wrapped around their bodies. The blazing red demons surrounded the lion beast. But the lion beast had a sword in its hand and did not panic at all. In the blink of an eye, sword light shot everywhere and flames filled the sky. A fierce battle began. The Diru beast that had just killed the second and third blazing red demon couldn't help but glance at the lion beast. Then, it coldly snorted and fiercely stared at the fourth blazing red demon. Modesty was a virtue, arrogance was the essence. The Diru beast's sword gradually became sharper, and the red rings in its eyes rotated. Every time it met the blazing red demon's eyes, it would cause it to fall into chaos for a short period of time. Then what awaited it was a fatal blow. There wasn't much danger in the entire battle. Meow Meow, who was holding the Gale Dagger, stayed by Dake's side the entire time. The 5-star Dream Demon didn't even make a move. Just by relying on the Lion Beast and the Diru Beast, they were able to kill a total of 40 blazing red demons. But after these blazing red demons died, the red substance that made up their bodies flowed into the cracks of the stone slabs, causing the liquid to slowly overflow and gradually submerge the stone slabs outside. Dake had no choice but to carry his backpack and walk up to the high platform. After reaching the high platform, Dake suddenly discovered that there was a passage behind the platform. He immediately understood. Looks like this palace can only be considered as the entrance. There's more space inside. He turned around and looked at the transparent jar filled with red liquid. He couldn't help but think. The red liquid inside the jar was even hotter than the one outside. Just by getting close to it, one would feel a burning sensation. He didn't need to think too much to know that this was definitely not a simple decoration. The feeling the jar gave him was a bit like a distillation device. By boiling the red liquid inside the jar, the lower boiling point of the liquid would be turned into steam. Then it would be transported through a pipe to a place where it would condense into a liquid for purification. After the blazing red demons were all killed, the red substance that made up their bodies flowed into the cracks of the stone slabs. After circulating, it was sucked back into the jar. Now the level of the jar had clearly risen. Dake faintly sensed something. He immediately brought the magic guide fairies down the high platform and into the passage. Then he turned around and said to the Dream Demon, "Go destroy it." 5000. I'll update another 5000 in the morning. Give yourself some encouragement. Hashtag 211.5/233 guaranteed monthly votes guaranteed Blade. Chapter 587. Demon Mimi. The Dream Demon raised the ribbon-like part of its body and curled its front end into a fist. It punched the transparent jar filled with red liquid. Boom. Even though it was not known for its physical attacks, the Dream Demon was still a 5-star magical fairy with 2500 attack power. With this punch, the transparent jar was smashed into smithereens without any suspense. In an instant, the boiling red liquid spewed out from the broken jar, followed by a large amount of steam. Suddenly, an alarm-like sound came from the jar. The Dream Demon blinked and looked towards the direction of the siren. Suddenly, it felt a strong suction force from the back of its head. It wanted to continue, but its vision flashed and it returned to the magical card. Dake quickly pushed into the tunnel and slammed the door shut. In the next moment, the red jar suddenly exploded. Website: https://m VIP can't you? VIP Rumble. The terrifying sound of the explosion went through the door and into the tunnel, echoing for a long time. The magical creatures and devices here seemed to be very good at self-destructing. When the sound stopped, Dake opened its hands with an innocent face. Deep in the darkness, in the last room, a large number of pipes led to this place from all directions. The condensed red liquid flowed out from the pipes and slowly flowed into the pool filled with red liquid. One side of the pool was close to the wall. The flowing liquid was as red as blood. It was close to the wall. 2 iron chains as thick as an arm hung down from both sides. A disheveled armored humanoid was hanging in the middle of the iron chains. Only its dangling feet were submerged in the pool. The red liquid in the pool flowed up its sharp claws and was absorbed by the skin, nourishing the humanoid figure. As the jar in the first room exploded, the red liquid in one of the pipes gradually stopped flowing. The liquid in the pool decreased a little, leaving only dripping water droplets. The humanoid figure seemed to have sensed something and suddenly trembled. Then, everything returned to normal. Only the liquid in the other pipes was still flowing out slowly. Dake continued to move forward. From the strength of the magical creatures in the first room, it was possible to deduce the overall strength of this boss dungeon. It was unrealistic to rely on the Dilu beasts and the lion beasts to pave the way. Although magic elves were the type that could continue to fight as long as they had magic power, if they were to engage in high-intensity battles for a short period of time, they would also show symptoms such as mental exhaustion. Not to mention, Dake's magic guide fairy had human-like intelligence and senses. Using other magic elves as the main combatants was the correct way to maintain a sustainable advancement. Dake had already put the slow-moving kettle pot back into the card as it advanced. Not long after, he walked out of the passage and arrived at the second room. The second room had the same architectural style as the first room, but there were no stone statues on either side. The platform with the transparent jar wasn't at the end, but in the middle. With the platform as the center, a total of 4 pipes extended from the ceiling in 4 directions and connected to the canister. Looking left and right, he could see that there were 4 passageways behind him. Clearly, this was a crossroads, and there were choices to be made. Straight, left, or right. With 3 choices, Dake looked at Meow Meow beside him. In a situation like this where he couldn't make a decision based on the information he had, it was better to leave it to the slime or Meow Meow, who had a keen sense of smell for treasure. Meow Meow had been playing with the dagger all this time, and suddenly swung it in a direction. The wind blade that shot out from the gale dagger hit a human body from 3 meters away. Bang! A humanoid monster covered in white cloth suddenly jumped out of the air. The white cloth on its chest had been torn apart by the wind blade, revealing its pale and withered skin. Although the white cloth was too wide and flat to look like a mummy, it seemed to be one. A mummy stalker. Dake immediately became alert. Prepare for battle. However, the lion beasts and the Dilu beasts reacted faster and rushed out, one on the left and one on the right. Dake took a deep breath and ordered the spirit bug to use the Eye of Illusion Breaker. As the ripples spread out like an eye, all the mummy stalkers within 10 meters were exposed. There weren't many of them, only a dozen or so. However, the palace was more than 50 meters long and wide. Dake reached out and grabbed a few magic cards in his hand. He immediately summoned them. In the name of Dake Dimung, I summon the Orb Sea Lion. Momo. The Orb Sea Lion's blue skin was smooth, and the tip of its mouth was pure white. Its bulbous nose was unusually pink. There was also a light blue collar around its neck. It was very cute. However, Dark didn't pick it up and pet it as usual. Instead he ordered, Maximum Range, Bewitching Voice. The mummy stalker would break out of hiding when it was attacked. Other than killing moves such as Eye of Illusion Breaker, large-scale killing moves with offensive power could also make it appear. With Moist Sound as a passive skill, Seductive Sound, Chio Chio Sea Lion could release water element attacks with a large range. Following the clear and melodious cry, a melodious sound was heard. Under the buff of the moist voice, the bewitching voice turned into layers of water ripples that spread rapidly. In the blink of an eye, it covered the entire palace. Even the furthest mummy stalkers couldn't escape the effects of the bewitching voice. They revealed themselves one after another. At a rough count, there were more than 40 of them. Dake continued to summon after a short pause. In the name of Dake Dimung, I summon the Fox Demon. Although the mummy stalker was a 4-star undying species, its attack and defense weren't high. If it was quantified, it was even lower than a 3-star undying species, which had 1,500 points. However, they had the dead but not dead characteristic and high movement speed and agility unlike the mummies. Even a 3-star fox beast and 3-star Meow Meow would be enough to deal with this type of magic guide fairy. After Dark summoned the demon fox, he gave the command to the lion beast and the Diru beast, who were brimming with battle intent, to retreat. Then the fox demon with blue flames and Meow Meow with the gale dagger took over the battlefield. Emo. The orb sea lion suddenly grabbed Dake's trousers and pointed at the top of his head. Dake raised his head and saw a different mummy stalker sticking to the ceiling like a spider. When the two looked at each other, the silent mummy stalker couldn't hold back anymore and pounced down from the sky. However, the lion beast's tall figure immediately blocked Dake's path. In the face of the sudden attack, it raised its right fist and used the rising dragon of Mount Lu. The violent lion-shaped energy wave changed its attack trajectory and roared from the bottom to the top. It fiercely slammed into the mummy stalker's corpse. Boom! The mummy lurker, on the other hand, displayed an extraordinary defense. Only its chest caved in, but it didn't shatter into pieces. After it was sent flying, it immediately stood up and pounced forward without fear of death. At least 5 stars. A thought flashed through Dark's mind, and his gaze suddenly turned. He discovered that among the 40 mummy lurkers, there were also several similar mummies that were indistinguishable from one another. Although the fox demon and Meow Meow could deal with 4-star mummy stalkers, if there was a 5-star special being mixed in, careful! In the blink of an eye, a special entity had sneaked into the crowd and launched a sneak attack on Meow Meow. Meow Meow felt its master's emotions when it was hit. It immediately retracted its right hand and blocked with its dagger. Bang! The dagger was sent flying and spun in the air. The special being didn't show any mercy. It opened its claws and fiercely clawed at Meow Meow's face. Meow Meow's half-closed eyes suddenly narrowed into slits. Its right claw didn't back down and grabbed at the special being. The moment the claws of both sides came into contact, an invisible distortion was produced. The mummy stalker's brain couldn't figure out why its power suddenly disappeared. Meow Meow used deceit to steal its power. Then, with a violent tug, it smashed the mummy stalker's head to the ground and crushed it. However, what flowed out of the head wrapped in white cloth wasn't a stinky black liquid, but a bright red liquid that was as red as blood. But just as Meow Meow showed a smug look, the special being without a head suddenly raised its hands and grabbed at its ankles. In that instant, a long and narrow green leaf shot out and nailed the special being's hands. The fox demon didn't even bother to look at them as it brushed past them. The leaves formed by the fox leaf wedge floated around it, and it would only attack at the crucial moment. It actually allowed it to move around the 4-star mummy with ease. Fox flash. Suddenly, the fox demon discovered one of the special beings. It rushed over at almost blinding speed, and its sharp claws, enhanced by its sure kill skill, tore open the mummy stalker's chest. The difference of 2 stars didn't seem to exist. Or maybe it was just that the mummy stalker's style of fighting was countered by the fox demon. In fact, this was the reason why Dake summoned it. Unless it was absolutely necessary, Dake didn't want to continue using Bliss 3 to evolve it. The structure of this boss room was obviously more complicated than he had expected. He wanted to save as much as he could. Dake's current formation was quite strong in actual combat, but his endurance was limited. He withdrew his attention from the fox demon and glanced at the special being that was crushed by the lion beast. He continued to observe the fox demon and Meow Meow's performance. Compared to the fox demon, Meow Meow was at a disadvantage. After deceit entered cooldown, it was difficult for it to deal damage to the special beings. On the other hand, the fox demon was able to deal effective damage to the mummy stalker's defense. But it couldn't last long. As the fox leaf wedge and 8 vine fists entered cooldown, the fox demon was in a difficult situation. Dake made a quick judgment and ordered, "Transform." The fox demon nodded lightly. It put 2 of its fingers together, and a light gathered at the tip of its fingers. Soon, it condensed into a green leaf. It looked like the leaf that a leopard cat used to transform. It put the leaf on top of its head and stared at the special being that was rushing towards it. Then it suddenly turned its head and looked at the lion beast that was guarding Dake. In the next moment, the fox demon's body glowed, and its originally slender body suddenly expanded. In the blink of an eye, it turned into the lion beast. Therefore, it was better to transform into the lion beast than to transform into a 5-star mummy stalker. And after obtaining the 3 stats, although those special individuals were 5-star, their 3 stats were inferior. They were no longer a match for the demon fox beast. It rushed into the mummy stalker's encirclement like a storm. The way it waved its lion claws was even faster and more ruthless than the lion beast. The 4-star mummy stalker's chest was directly pierced through and torn in half. The 5-star mummy stalker's head was also twisted off and thrown away. Not long after, the mummy stalkers in the room were all cleaned up. Dake took out the magic card and kept the exhausted but still excited Meow Meow back into the card. He then followed Meow Meow's suggestion and entered the passage on the left. He then ordered the fox demon to destroy the jar. Boom! Before the jar exploded, Dake put the fox demon back into the card and immediately closed the door of the passage and continued to move forward. After walking through a similar passage, Dake finally arrived at the third room. He quickly observed the structure of the entire room. The floor was still made of stone slabs, and there was a red liquid flowing through the gaps. The platform was in the middle, and the red liquid was boiling in the jar. However, other than the passage that he entered from, there was only one passage that led to the front of the room. Suddenly, his eyes lit up as he realized that there was a treasure chest beside the passage. Drip. As the lion beast stepped into the room, red rain started to drip from the ceiling. The lion beast suddenly took a step back and retreated into the passage. Dake looked from the side and realized that the raindrops gathered on the stone slabs and slowly swelled into a frogman-like monster. Skin like blood. It's a blood frogman. Dake took a deep breath and smelled the thick smell of blood. The blood frogmen were a very famous demon during the war. They were born from blood and belonged to the blood elemental species of water elemental life. They were very diverse. There were 2-star and 2-star blood frog servants, 3-star blood frog warriors and assassins, 4-star blood frog mages, 5-star blood frog giants, and 6-star blood frog kings. And all of the blood frogmen mentioned above had appeared in this third room. The 1-star and 2-star blood frog servants were short and thin. Their bodies were bent and their eyes were lifeless. Their eyelids were drooping and they looked like authors who stayed up all night. They were tired and weak. However, such weak blood frog servants brought about a lot of casualties to humans during the war. This was because they could hide in the sewage and they only had one sure kill skill, blood explosion. A self-explosion skill that sacrificed oneself was extremely powerful and impossible to guard against. Other than the blood frog servants, the blood frogmen with higher stars were even more difficult to deal with. The 3-star blood frog warriors had the sure kill skills Bloodlust and Blood Rage. They could absorb blood to heal themselves quickly and use Blood Rage to enter a berserk state. The 3-star blood frog assassins had the sure kill skill Blood Poison. Once they were scratched by their daggers or claws, they would be inflicted with blood poison. Their blood flow would gradually slow and they would be unable to move. However, if the blood frog assassins injected blood poison into their bodies, they would be able to accelerate their blood flow and become more excited. Their reaction and speed would also be improved. As for the 4-star blood frog mages, they were proficient in corpse blood explosion. They could make a corpse explode on the spot. It was extremely terrifying. The 5-star blood frog giants were over 10 meters tall. They could control the blood in their bodies and shoot it out. They could also turn it into a weapon to attack the enemy. Although they didn't have many tricks and lacked strangeness, they were very effective. Their strength and size were enough to crush the battlefield. As for the 6-star blood frog king, Dark took a deep breath and immediately took out 4 magic cards from his card pack. They were Illusory Beast, Ibu, Demon Fox, Pride 3-0, and Paradise 3 Moon Improved. Even though the Fox Demon had just experienced a fierce battle, it was still Dake's trump card when facing such a large army of blood frogmen. First, summon Ibu. After only 3 seconds of summoning, Ibu appeared at his feet. Dake timed it to summon Pride 3-0 after 3 seconds. Ibu was promoted from 1-star to 2-star. At the same time, he received a fairy field skill. Next, summon the Fox Demon. The Fox Demon was confused about being summoned again. However, when it opened its eyes, it suddenly understood. The corner of its mouth couldn't help but curl up. It craved battle, craved to become stronger, and craved the feeling of being needed. Fox Demon Evolve. Dake didn't hesitate too much and directly summoned Extreme Bliss 3 Moon Improved. Bathed in a strong golden pink light, the Fox Demon completed its transformation from growth stage to mature stage. It resisted the urge to turn around and lick its face. Instead, it raised its chest and looked at the blood frogman with a cold smile. In its eyes, these ugly and stinky demons were already dried up blood on the ground. Ivan, Mistyfield. Under Dake's command, Ibu squatted down and put its front paws in front of its chest like a young girl praying. The moonlight shone down, and it was as beautiful as a wedding dress. Pink mist gushed out from under his feet, and quickly spread into the palace. The blood frogman also went berserk at that moment. Good morning. I've updated 10,000 words on the 2nd. Only 20 left. I'll update on the night of the 3rd. 213/233 guaranteed monthly votes, guaranteed blade, automatic subscription. Chapter 588. Croak, croak. The Blood Frog King's croak resounded through the hall. The 1-star and 2-star Blood Frog servants charged toward the entrance without hesitation. Their bodies stretched extremely long when they jumped, and then instantly contracted like a spring, crossing the distance between the two sides. The smell of blood almost broke through the pink mist. The 3-star Blood Frog warriors raised their weapons and bravely followed behind the Blood Frog servants. They were fewer in number than the Blood Frog servants, but there were still more than 40 of them. The 3-star Blood Frog assassins were even fewer in number. In the blink of an eye, they blended into the Blood Frog servants, and the difference could no longer be distinguished. The 4-star Blood Frog wizards still stood at the back, motionless. The staff in their hands was raised high, and they let out croaks. Between the Blood Frog wizards and Blood Frog warriors, 2 huge 5-star Blood Frog giants climbed up from the ground, pounding their chests and letting out deafening roars. The 6-star Blood Frog King at the back raised its horn and blew it hard. A glaring red halo was emitted from the soles of its feet. The red halo was close to the ground and instantly radiated throughout the hall. Remember the website, MVIP can't you? VIPA miniature halo appeared under the feet of all the blood frogmen, and their bodies suddenly ignited with a bloody light. Without a doubt, this was a halo technique that boosted all of them. Demon Fox. Dake Dimming suddenly shouted in the midst of the pink mist and gushing blood. The 9-tailed fox instantly lowered its body, and its 4 claws dug into the ground. Blue flames spread from the soles of its feet to its entire body. Its 9 long fluffy tails suddenly straightened, and the tip of each tail was condensed with blue willow. The wisps. Ultimate skill Willow, the wisp. Under Dake's command, the 9-tailed fox instantly let out a low roar. 9 Willow. The wisp rose from its tail at the same time, and then quickly expanded into boiling fireballs. It swung its tail hard, and the 9 fireballs shot toward the Blood Frog army. After the 9 fireballs were shot out, they separated into a horizontal line, and shot into the group of frogs. Rumble. 9 explosions soared into the sky and flames burst out from 9 locations. Even if the 2-star Blood Frog servants had the support of halos, they simply couldn't block the spells of the 6-star magic elf. Countless Blood Frog servants exploded in the blue flames, and bright red liquid splashed out, dyeing the pink mist red. However, the 3-star Blood Frog warriors and Blood Frog assassins were able to hold on under the protection of the Blood Frog King's halo. The 40 Blood Frog warriors used their weapons to support their bodies, and their eyes gradually turned black and red. It was obvious that they wanted to use this opportunity to go berserk. However, as soon as the black light appeared in its eyes, it was suppressed by the mist field. The pink mist spread over, and its expression became calm again. Then it was extremely shocked. The failure of Blood Rage was completely out of the Blood Frog warriors' expectations. They stopped in their tracks because they were too shocked. A few of them suddenly laid down and sucked the red liquid in between the cracks of the stone slab, activating their ultimate skill, Bloodlust, to recover from their injuries. The dozen or so Blood Frog assassins stabbed their daggers, that were covered in blood poison, towards their own thighs. However, after their thighs were stabbed, the blood poison didn't trigger. They were also stunned, and their low intelligence suddenly showed signs of almost crashing. Croak, croak, croak. The Blood Frog mages at the back who were lucky enough to survive saw the warriors and assassins in front suddenly stop, and waved their staffs to urge them. As Blood Frogmen, they should be proud to die in battle. Even if their limbs were broken, they had to rush into the enemy's position. because the blood frog mages at the back would make the best use of their corpses. The benevolent Blood Lord would send the blood frogmen who died from blood explosion into the Blood Kingdom, so that they would forever be blessed by the Blood Lord. The blood frog warriors and blood frog assassins, as well as the blood frog servants who were lucky enough to survive, regrouped under the fierce urging of the blood frog mages, and actually charged towards the entrance of the passage again. Dake clearly knew the configuration and battle tactics of the blood frogmen. He looked at the defeated soldiers who were charging forward fearlessly and sneered in his heart. He immediately ordered, "Nine-tailed fox, summon Fox Flame Dragon." Okay. The nine-tailed fox lightly stepped on the ground, and the 9 long tails stood up again. The flames released from the long tails merged together and condensed into a ferocious-looking blue flame dragon. The flame dragon roared silently and rushed out in a straight line under the control of the nine-tailed fox. The blood frogmen they encountered on the way were instantly burned and evaporated, and couldn't stop it at all. The nine-tailed fox's gaze passed through the pink mist and looked at the blood frog mages at the back seriously. The fox flame dragon rushed towards the blood frog mages without hesitation, trying to kill them all before they could cast corpse blood explosion. Croak croak. The blood frog mages seemed to have read the nine-tailed fox's intention, and immediately let out an ear-piercing scream. When the 2 5-star blood frog giants heard the sound, one of them continued to charge forward, while the other slowly bent down and slapped the flame dragon on the ground. Although the fox flame dragon was thick and long, it was just like a loach in front of the 10-meter-tall giant. If this slap hit, it would definitely be scattered on the spot. However, the nine-tailed fox didn't lose control of the fox flame dragon from the beginning to the end. With a thought, the fox flame dragon nimbly turned around and escaped from the blood frog giant's hands, biting the nearest blood frog mage. Croak! The blood frog mage screamed, and the magic staff in his hand was pointed at the fox flame dragon's head. A strange circular shockwave was suddenly released from the tip of the magic staff, and it blasted into the fox flame dragon's mouth. However, even if the fox flame dragon's throat was pierced, it wasn't affected at all and bit the blood frog mage. With a wail, the blood frog mage was burned to ashes by the blue flames. The fox flame dragon's momentum didn't decrease, and it bit another blood frog mage nearby. When the blood frog mage saw his companion's fate, he immediately retreated in shock and anger. The blood-red liquid between the cracks of the stone slabs burst out under his control, forming a blood wall. However, the blood wall couldn't stop the fox flame dragon at all, and the blood frog mage was bitten and swallowed while screaming. Croak croak croak. Another blood frog mage not far away suddenly cried out, and the blood frog mage in its mouth suddenly emitted a bloody light, and then it actually exploded. The power of the blood energy released by the explosion finally scattered the fox flame dragon on the spot. However, there were less than 10 blood frog mages to begin with, and they paid the price of losing 2 of them. However, the nine-tailed fox frowned, and it was obviously not satisfied. It stomped on the ground with its front paws, and suddenly raised its neck, and a bolt of lightning instantly formed. Boom! Like the roar of thunder, the bolt of lightning was like an arrow on a bow, and it instantly shot out. The bolt of lightning scurried through the air, but it didn't go straight for the mages in the back row. Instead, it slanted upwards, and in the blink of an eye, it hit the blood frog giant that was quickly moving forward. The blood frog giant was more than 10 meters tall, and its 2 thick giant arms drooped to the ground. Its arms were covered with lumps that looked like cysts, and poisonous blood trickled out from them. Its big mouth stretched all the way to its ears, and its frog tongue was extremely long and thick. The part that was dragged outside curled up and contracted, as if it could shoot out at any time to catch the enemy. As a giant, its skin was extremely thick, and with the halo covering it, its defense was even stronger. However, with only an explosive sound, the nine-tailed fox's fox lightning strike penetrated the red light on its surface and went straight into its body. Beep beep beep. Lightning exploded, wrapping around its body. The blood frog giant's body was numb in pain, and it stopped abruptly. The nine-tailed fox snorted coldly, and the magic in its body gathered, and the blue flame burst out again. Lion beast. Dake observed the situation and immediately gave the order. After receiving the order, the lion beast pulled out the single scabbard, and with the sword in front of it, it guarded the entrance of the passage. The entrance of the passage was easy to defend and hard to attack. The Blood Frogman army all moved toward the passage, and they were in a position where they would be wantonly bombed. The 2-star and 2-star Blood Frog servants were simply cannon fodder, and the 3-star Blood Frog warriors and Blood Frog assassins couldn't move at all in the mist field. Once these cannon fodder couldn't successfully approach, the 4-star Blood Frog mages couldn't use corpse blood explosion. The only ones that could pose a threat to them were the 2 Blood Frog giants and the last Blood Frog king. The Blood Frog giants mainly relied on their huge bodies to crush their opponents. Once they couldn't break through the relatively narrow passage, they could only rely on long-range tricks like spraying blood. Although the Blood Frog king's body was smaller than the Blood Frog giants, it was still a giant frog with a height and width of more than 5 meters. Therefore, this passage could be said to have the geographical advantage. Now, the entire battle was completely suppressed by the 9-tailed fox's firepower. Next, they only needed to continue to guard the passage and wait for the 9-tailed fox to finish charging and release the heavenly dog that swallowed everything. Then, it would be enough to determine the victory. Thinking of this, Dake couldn't help but narrow his eyes. He was quite clear about the information about the Blood Frogman, but he didn't know much about the abilities of the Blood Frog King. However, if they could rely on powerful firepower to kill it, its abilities wouldn't be important. The Blood Frog mage's urging finally worked. The Blood Frog warriors and Blood Frog assassins dragged their broken bodies and rushed over. However, the lion beast guarded the passage. The moment the Blood Frogman rushed over, it swung its sword and slapped the bodies away. When a group of Blood Frog servants rushed over, it rewarded them with a Beast King fist, and sent them flying before they self-destructed. Under such circumstances, the Blood Frog mages couldn't grasp the timing at all. Several Blood Frogmen were sent flying before they exploded. Countless flowers of blood splattered in the air, bringing about madness and poignant beauty. The 9-tailed fox didn't charge up for long. When the Blood Frog giant nearby struggled out of its paralyzed state, the 9-tailed fox had already condensed the blue flames all over its body into a huge energy ball. Its eyes were solemn, and its mental strength was extremely concentrated. When the energy reached its peak, it roared, "Heavenly Dog!" The energy ball suddenly shot out and blasted towards the Blood Frog King in the last row. Croak! The Blood Frog giant tried to slap the energy ball down from the air, but it didn't succeed. The energy ball was released extremely quickly. In the blink of an eye, it had already flown in front of the Blood Frog King, and then, boom! The huge energy ball exploded in front of the Blood Frog King. A flame-like blue halo instantly swayed and tore apart the pink mist. The mist field was actually forcefully blown apart by the heavenly dog. However, at this moment, the field's effect was no longer needed. The Blood Frog giant revealed a horrified and distorted expression in the terrifying energy explosion. The remaining Blood Frog mages were just about to escape when they were swallowed by the explosion. The Blood Frog giant closer didn't even have time to react. A terrifying mushroom cloud rose into the sky, and the stone slabs on the ground were blown to pieces. Blood mist rose in the air. Even the second Blood Frog giant was instantly swallowed. Dake and the others quickly retreated the moment the heavenly dog was released. Before they turned the corner, the aftermath of the explosion had already rushed to the entrance. The lion beast stepped forward bravely and crossed its arms in front of it, taking in all the aftermath of the explosion. Before the aftermath of the explosion subsided, a second explosion suddenly came from inside the palace. Dake frowned slightly and immediately understood that it must have been the explosion after the jar on the high platform was shattered. The range of the heavenly dog was wider than he had expected. He began to worry about whether the treasure chest over there was okay. Well done. Dake gently stroked the 9-tailed fox's soft fur. The latter had already fallen into a weak state after releasing the heavenly dog. At this moment, it gradually turned its head and gently rubbed its nose against Dake's hand. Then a light flashed, and the 9-tailed fox degenerated into a demon fox due to excessive consumption. The demon fox's legs went soft, and it leaned into Dake's arms. It struggled, but it didn't have the strength to stand up straight. Dake was still stroking the back of its head. After a while he whispered into its ear, "Go back and rest for a while." The demon fox nodded slightly. Dake removed its summon. After putting the demon fox magic card into the card bag, Dake took out 2 energy potions and activated them to replenish the magic power of the lion beast. When the lion beast was fully recovered, they raised their attention and went back into the palace. Demons had various abilities, and no one knew if the Blood Frog King had the ability to escape and come back to life. The necessary caution was always the best way to go further in the underground city. But when they walked out of the passage, they found that the entire palace had been completely destroyed. Not only did the high platform and jar in the middle disappear, but even the treasure chest was. Dake's eyes lit up, and he found a corner of the treasure chest from the other side of the passage. The door of the passage must have been shattered by the explosion, and the treasure chest along with the stone slab was blown into the passage. He wondered if it was still intact. Dake looked around. The Blood Frogman army was nowhere to be seen. Even the bodies of the 2 blood frogs had disappeared. He didn't know if they were swallowed by the underground city or turned into blood water. The Blood Frog King was the closest to the explosion, so naturally, there was nothing left of it. But on its head, the blood crystal crown, which was too small for its fat body, was not destroyed. Dake nodded at the lion beast. The lion beast walked over to pick up the crown, wiped off the dirt on the surface, and brought it in front of Dake. Dake realized that this was most likely an unexpected surprise, so he opened the Eye of Truth to check. The blood crystal crown showed its value under the Eye of Truth. Surprisingly, it had an extremely high value similar to the magic fire, magic book. This crown does contain magic power. Dake thought for a while, took out a bag from his backpack, and wrapped it up before putting it into another bag. Since it was the crown of the Blood Frog King, it must have an extraordinary mystery. The magic tools and weapons he had obtained since entering the underground city could also be used to practice making item cards. He continued to walk around the palace until he reached the entrance of the passageway. Only then did he shake his head regretfully. This blood crystal crown was all that he had obtained other than the treasure chest. The disadvantage of a large-scale magic explosion was that if he wasn't careful, the materials and treasures would be destroyed as well. Dake paused at the entrance of the tunnel. The lion beast got into a fighting stance and punched out. The debris blocking the entrance of the tunnel was instantly blown away by the lion-shaped energy wave. They entered the tunnel and quickly dug out the treasure chest buried in the debris. Gotcha! After opening the chest twice, the treasures inside were finally revealed. What is this? Dake was slightly stunned and couldn't help but take a closer look. He saw a blood-red crystal lying quietly in the corner of the treasure chest. This crystal had a trace of blood smell, and it looked somewhat familiar. It was like the blood crystal of the water dragon lizard. Is this some kind of creature's blood crystal? Dake put on his gloves and picked up the blood crystal from the treasure chest. Then he took out the blood crystal crown from his bag and compared it. It's not the same material. He shook his head and opened the Eye of Truth. As expected, the value of this blood crystal was much lower than the blood crystal crown. It was only between the worm tree and the cat grass. Although it was a pity, if one thought about it carefully, they would know that a treasure chest that appeared in the middle of a dungeon like this wouldn't usually contain anything good. In comparison, the value of this blood crystal was actually quite good. If they could experiment to find out what kind of creature's blood crystal it was, they could maximize its value. Dake put away the blood crystal in his bag and continued to move forward. He left the safe zone at 8 p.m. sharp. After more than an hour of searching, he found the stone door. Now he had crossed 3 rooms and spent almost an hour. It was already past 10 p.m. Maybe the seniors in the safe zone are still waiting for me to go back and open paradise. I have to hurry. Dake calmed himself down and walked out from the other end of the tunnel. He entered the 4th room. What surprised him was that there were no monsters in the 4th room. At first, he thought that it would be another invisible monster like the mummy stalker, but until he destroyed the jar on the platform and entered the next passage, there was no monster at all. Similarly, it was the same in the 5th room. It wasn't until the 6th room that new monsters appeared. On the platform, in front of the transparent jar, there was a humanoid monster sitting cross-legged with its arms crossed. Different from the atmosphere of the previous rooms, the sixth room was filled with a bleak and austere atmosphere, as if a storm was about to come. Dake looked up and frowned slightly. The humanoid monster was wearing a bamboo hat that was tilted downwards and covered its entire face. It was wearing black cloth and its body shape was similar to a human's. There was almost no difference. On its back, there was an extremely long broadsword. In this world of swords and magic, Dake sensed the aura of an ancient swordsman from this monster. He was surprised by this and became interested in this monster. Could it be that this is a rank boss? But this doesn't look like the final room of a rank boss. I keep feeling that something is wrong. Just as Dake was thinking, the humanoid monster sitting cross-legged on the platform moved first. It pulled out its hand and lifted the front of the bamboo hat, finally revealing a pair of eyes. Below the eyes, it was wearing a black metal mask. Its eyes were very strange. There was an inverted triangle engraved in both of its eyeballs. Black eyeballs, golden triangle. It was very eye-catching. Being stared at by this pair of eyes, Dake felt a faint chill. This made him subconsciously put his hand into his card bag. However, the monster's gaze quickly moved away from him and fixed on the lion beast. Then the humanoid monster slowly got up and hooked its finger at the lion beast. This action alone was enough to make people feel surprised. This was definitely not an action that an irrational monster would do. The lion beast narrowed its eyes and said in a low voice, "Master, is it provoking me?" The corner of Dake's mouth curled up. He became more interested. It seems so. The lion beast was puzzled. Then what should I do next? Dake gave him the answer. Accept the challenge. I will take care of this side. The Diru beast stepped forward and stood in front of Dake. The lion beast nodded and walked out of the passage. Its eyes were bright and full of spirit. It had a stronger fighting spirit than when it faced ordinary monsters. The other party's star level was higher than it, but it was not afraid. After studying during the holidays, it had already gotten rid of its inherent way of thinking. Star level did not determine anything. There was a huge difference between different magic guiding fairies. The three attributes were just a description of the basic strength. Powerful skills could bring out 30% of the strength. This was a move. Victory and defeat were never a comparison on paper. After stepping out of the 5 stone slabs, the lion beast reached out and pulled out the holy sword from the scabbard. It pointed at the humanoid monster on the high platform. The humanoid monster suddenly let out a chuckle. Then it raised its hand and grabbed the handle of the broadsword on its back. It was less than 1.8 meters tall, but the broadsword on its back was more than 2 meters long. The back of the broadsword was thick, and the blade was very wide. The blade was unstoppable. Schwa! The humanoid monster pulled out the broadsword and then pulled it up. It flew out of the scabbard and rushed into the sky. Then the humanoid monster exerted force on its feet and jumped into the sky. It firmly grabbed the handle of the broadsword and suddenly slashed down. This slash was aimed at the air, but it was full of power. The energy from the broadsword was like a tide. When the broadsword slashed down, the energy waves rolled. The ground shattered. Has it started over there? Finally, in the room, a rat-like monster appeared at the edge of the pool filled with red liquid. It sat on a stone block like a human. It crossed its thin legs and held a cigarette made from daylily grass in its hand. The smoke it puffed out transformed into various shapes. After taking a puff, it raised its head and looked at the wall opposite the pool with a relaxed expression. The humanoid figure in armor that was chained to the center of the wall in the shape of a cross had quietly opened its scarlet eyes. "What is your name?" the rat asked leisurely. It was quite calm and elegant. The humanoid figure in armor stared at the seemingly weak rat-like monster. Blue veins squirmed around the corners of its eyes. The blood in the pool flowed up its beast-like feet and was absorbed by its skin. Its rotten and withered body gradually recovered under the nourishment of the blood-red liquid. Its limbs surged with power that it hadn't felt in a long time. It had been a long time. Why did it have this feeling? Groot Dullus's calm heart was filled with waves of blood. "Hey, what is your name?" the rat urged again. Groot Dellis replied with the name that had been lingering in its memory. Groot Dellis. The rat-like monster's expression changed in an instant. Every boss in the Shungmalian underground city was not born without roots. They were all manifestations of history. They had left behind a thick and heavy stroke in the wheel of time. Groot Dellis was the same. Even though it had lost its memories of when it was still alive, only its name would be forever engraved. As the pipes were cut off one after another, the red liquid in the pool could no longer keep up with its absorption speed. Because of this, it felt hungry and thirsty. Every cell in its body seemed to be shouting and screaming, urging it to find a substitute. Fresh blood, or something else. Thinking was an extremely troublesome thing. Groot felt that its brain was still stiff. Just suppressing the madness that surged from the depths of its heart was already exhausting all of its strength. It seemed to be calm on the surface, but it was always on the verge of exploding. You know my name? Groot Dellis silently looked at the rat that appeared from the shadow gate and thought in its heart. The rat-like monster's expression calmed down after a few changes. It then stared with its small round eyes and said in a shrill voice, "Of course I know." Groot said calmly, "Tell me, what does it mean?" But the rat-like monster said, "Join us." Groot frowned and said, "What?" The rat-like monster stuffed the cigarette made from the dream grass into its mouth and swallowed it whole. It said, "Life or death, there are two paths in front of you." Gertrude grinned and laughed. Then the laughter became louder and louder, gradually filled with madness. "What gave you the courage to threaten me?" Groot Dellis, the famous orc sword saint of the continent 100 years ago. In the 6th room, the humanoid monster wielding the broadsword was now fighting with the lion beast. Although a fair duel with a monster in the underground city was a very stupid thing to do, but this humanoid monster gave off a very different feeling. Its every move was full of rationality. Whether it was its appearance or its inner nature, it showed that it had basic intelligence. The monsters in the underground city were generally divided into 3 levels according to their intelligence level. Normal monsters with intelligence level lower than 2, elite monsters with intelligence level higher than 2, and level bosses with intelligence level close to 3. But it wasn't because of the high intelligence level that they were strong, but because of the high level they were in. Although Dake had only seen a level boss during his trip to the underground city last semester, the two-headed demon, Talon Leon Keynes, had left a deep impression on him. Moreover, the abyssal monster he had encountered in the hidden space clearly had extremely high basic intelligence. If that abyssal monster was a level boss, then was this humanoid monster with a broadsword in front of him really a level boss of the 10th floor? Dake just stood at the entrance of the passage and continued to observe. The humanoid monster's body was so tightly wrapped that he couldn't deduce its species based on its physical characteristics. But the aura it emitted and the level of its basic ability when fighting with the lion beast should be at the 6th star without a doubt. The 6th star was still at the 2nd level. In the underground city, there were very few level bosses at the 2nd level. The battle between the humanoid monster and the lion beast gradually became more intense. Although there was a slight difference in their basic attributes, the lion beast's holy sword made up for this difference. Although the humanoid monster's broadsword was also a sharp weapon, it clearly couldn't be compared to the holy sword. The balance on paper meant that both sides were standing on the same starting line. Who will win? The lion beast. The Diru beast gave an understatement response. After it said this, the battle in the palace lost its balance. The humanoid monster began to use its ability in the clash of the sword and the broadsword. Black tentacles drilled out of its sleeves and wrapped around the broadsword like a bandage. Bang! The tentacles were completely imprinted on the broadsword and a pitch-black flame burst out. The lion beast's eyes lit up and didn't dodge. The single scabbard in its hand also burst out with a holy light, competing with the pitch-black flame. The light and dark attributes restrained each other. The holy sword had an additional 50% restraint against the dark attribute. However, the pitch-black flame clearly wasn't an ordinary item. It seemed to have an additional restraint against the light attribute. After the clash, the holy light of the holy sword quickly gained the upper hand and suppressed the pitch-black flame. The humanoid monster's sleeves were ignited by the holy light and began to burn. Its movements were clearly distorted at that moment, and it immediately retreated. After the sleeve was burned, it revealed a pitch-black arm covered in fine scales. Are they snake scales or lizard scales? Dake's eyes flashed, but it didn't make a sound. However, the lion beast roared out, "Beast King Fist!" The Beast King Fist that was closely connected to the sword shattered a large portion of the humanoid monster's clothes, revealing a part of its body hidden under the black clothes. Seeing that its identity was about to be exposed, the humanoid monster suddenly stomped its feet, and its body was covered in a pitch-black flame armor. However, this kind of dark attribute armor only made it more restrained. The holy light emitted by the holy sword had already affected its movements. If that's the case, the humanoid monster let out a low murmur. The golden triangles in its pitch-black eyes suddenly reversed, and the flame armor shrunk into an extremely thin layer that clung to its body. Suddenly, there was an explosive sound from its arms. Its originally slender arms expanded as if they were filled with air. The way it wielded the broadsword completely changed. It no longer paid attention to technique and switched to a more aggressive style that was more compatible with the broadsword. Every swing released a monstrous wave of air that shattered the stone tiles on the ground layer by layer. The lion beast was suppressed in the blink of an eye. The atmosphere on the battlefield was suffocating. However, the lion beast didn't panic because of this. Its eyes were filled with madness, but its heart was abnormally calm. This kind of move couldn't last for long. Once the humanoid monster's killing move reached a certain point, it would be the lion beast's turn to take advantage of it. It tried its best to avoid the wind from the blade and maintain its perfect state to deal with the humanoid monster. It had almost no experience in fighting one-on-one. This was a very rare opportunity. Only by constantly training itself in battle could it be strong enough to protect all justice. 2 minutes later, the attack of the humanoid demon suddenly weakened, and the lion beast seemed to have caught on to this situation. He smashed the stone slab under his feet and charged forward like lightning. The holy sword in his hand burst out with a holy white light, and the sword blade extended to 3 to 4 meters long. It raised the sword vertically and sidestepped the incoming blade. Then the long sword closed in and suddenly slashed horizontally. Puff! The humanoid monster's right arm holding the blade was cut off on the spot. It didn't hesitate to follow up with a second slash. From the left side, it slashed open the humanoid monster's abdomen. Finally, its whole body turned around and the third slash was fatal. Killing move. Triple slash. The humanoid monster's head was separated from its body. The light in its eyes quickly dimmed and the golden triangles disappeared. However, no blood flowed out of the wounds on its arm, abdomen, and neck. The lion beast knelt down and kept panting. It had done its best. Dake walked out of the passage. He didn't say anything and went directly to the humanoid monster's body. He lowered his head and looked at the corpse's wounds. His eyes showed that he was deep in thought. These 3 wounds went straight into the body, but he couldn't see a trace of the body's structure. There were no muscles, no blood vessels, and no bones. The entire body seemed to only have the skin covered in snake scales and the pitch-black substance that filled the interior. He wanted to take a closer look, but the humanoid monster's body suddenly shriveled up. There was only a puddle of foul black water left on the ground. With a trace of indescribable confusion, Dake suddenly raised his head. There were some sounds coming from the passage on the other side of the platform. Be on guard. He immediately took out a magic card and silently chanted the usual summoning spell. The dream demon appeared by his side again. The dream demon didn't have much energy to begin with. When it appeared, it was still full of energy. Dake held the improved Paradise 3 moon in his hand. He quickly walked up the platform and looked down at the passage from above. Behind him, the Dilu beast unceremoniously reached out to the lion beast. The lion beast helplessly smiled and threw the single scabbard to him. The Dilu beast's lips curled up and threw the dragon Fang sword to him for protection. The 2 sides completed the exchange. The Dilu beast stepped onto the platform and walked to Dake's side. The little demon beast flew down from the air and stopped on Dake's shoulder. Not long after, there was suddenly the sound of hurried footsteps coming from the passage. A mouse-like monster suddenly ran out and let out an ear-piercing squeak at the figure on the platform. But in the next moment, its body stiffened and a human-like expression of shock appeared on its face. It guessed that the person on the platform wasn't the humanoid monster, but a human student. And this human student gave it a feeling of familiarity. When did we meet? After a short moment of hesitation, the footsteps behind it gradually approached. The mouse monster suddenly let out a shriek and ran to the shadows in the corner. Then it went into the shadows and only revealed half of its, but as it trembled, there were always people who didn't listen to the mouse's warning and made the mouse embarrassed. The second set of footsteps coming from the passage was more steady and more irritable. Like metal being cut apart, there was an ear-piercing squeak. Dake glanced at the mouse monster's butt and quickly shaking tail, and had a guess in his heart. The aura of the holy sword. The Dilu beast suddenly grasped the hilt of the holy sword, and his expression became serious. The aura coming from the passage was without a doubt the aura of the holy sword. Someone was holding the holy sword. It wasn't placed in a treasure chest or hung on the wall as an ornament. That holy sword had an owner. The worst result. After Dake understood what the Dilu beast meant, he couldn't help but whisper to himself. The humanoid monster with the broadsword wasn't a tier boss, so it was most likely an elite monster. And the one coming out of the passage was most likely a tier boss with the holy sword. Then after the passage, it should be the final room for the tier boss. No, if it's only one, then it's not the worst result. Dake took a deep breath and chanted a summoning technique, activating the Elysium 3, moon in his hand. Under the sprinkling of pink moonlight, the little dream demon squinted its eyes like it was enjoying the sweet rain. Then its body started to grow, evolving into a 5-star magic guide sprite. Dream demon. Activate the nightmare realm. Dark ordered in advance without any hesitation. Little demon heartsuit. The dream demon immediately responded in high spirits. The ribbons on its body fluttered without any wind. The 3 pearls on its chest emitted a red glow. In the blink of an eye, an extremely thick purple smoke burst out from under his body, with the front as the main point, quickly spreading out in all directions. In a blink of an eye, the thick purple fog had covered the entire area from the platform to the passage. Because of this, the entire space was slightly distorted. Within the passage, the demon with the holy sword walked out of the passage and stepped into the purple fog. With a frown, blood chi appeared on the soles of its feet and attached to its legs like long boots. But this purple fog wasn't the poisonous fog it thought it was. This measure was useless. A stagnant feeling like it was stuck in a quagmire. It suppressed the madness beneath its flat surface, surging up like a tide. It instantly slashed out with its sword. A terrifying blood-red sword light sliced through the fog, splitting the right wall. The rat monster's tail instantly melted under the sword light. It suddenly screamed and drilled into the shadows. 10,000 words, equivalent to 5 chapters of other books. Oh, I hope you understand. A person's subjective will is really weak, falling asleep the moment I close my eyes. I must set an alarm tonight. 216/233. Guaranteed monthly votes, guaranteed blade, automatic subscription. Chapter 589. Even though the Holy Sword was the signature weapon of the hero, it wasn't only the hero that could control the Holy Sword. Some people couldn't rely on the Holy Sword to obtain the hero's bloodline, but they could fully utilize the power of the Holy Sword. They could be the Sword Saint, that could control tens of thousands of swords, or the War God, that could control all weapons. The Orc Sword Saint Groot Delis was a true Sword Saint. He was extremely famous 100 years ago. In order to train his sword skills, he had challenged the masters of the various races and had never lost. Later on, after his skills had improved, Groot found a holy sword, hidden in an ancient ruin, and gained the recognition of the Holy Sword. From then on, the Orc Sword Saint Groot Delis' name could no longer be suppressed. It didn't take long for his name to spread across the entire continent. However, it was easy to break if it was too hard. No one would have thought that the moment Groot became famous, he would fall. The first time he participated in a war with the demons as a sword saint, he was focused on and killed. Remember, https://m, VIP can't you? VIP after Groot Dulles casually swung his sword, he didn't pay attention to the weak mouse anymore. Even though he was only a shell of the Groot Dulles, he was still a sword saint. His arrogance as a sword saint was still in his bones. He was never interested in the weak. The reason why he chased after the mouse was because he smelled the scent of a strong person in this direction. He craved blood, craved battle, craved the clash and slaughter between strong people. Therefore, after he swung his sword, he turned his gaze to the high platform in the middle and stared at the Diru beast holding the holy sword. Draw your sword. Even though his feet still felt sluggish, the orc sword saint could no longer hold back the restlessness in his heart. He raised the holy sword in his hand and pointed it at the high platform, letting out a low beastly roar. However, his battle invitation wasn't successfully transmitted. The orc dialect from 100 years ago was too different from the current kingdom's official language. To Dake, it sounded more like a threatening roar. However, the moment the communication failed, both sides launched an attack at the same time. Little demon. The dream demon did not seem to feel the tense atmosphere and let out a cheerful cry. The next moment, it floated forward under Dake's command and merged into the nightmare realm. In the eyes of the Beastman Sword Saint, that specter-like purple life form completely disappeared. Dream demons can freely create illusions in the nightmare realm, causing people to be unable to differentiate between reality and illusion, causing them to fall into chaos. However, after the orc sword saint narrowed his eyes and pondered, he suddenly swung his sword forward. The terrifying blood-red sword light appeared once again, completely tearing apart the smoke in front of him. That sword light even flew more than 10 meters away, before it melted in the air. Ah! The dream demon suddenly screamed and appeared in the air. The corners of the Beastman Sword Saint's mouth curled up, and a cold smile appeared on his hairy face. After that, it sheathed the holy sword at its waist. Leaning forward, it stomped on the ground and sprinted forward. Its base speed was much higher than the dream demon. In the nightmare realm, its movement path would be distorted and lengthened, causing its movement speed in reality to be extremely slow. Originally, he was running at high speed, but now he seemed to be running on the spot. Until he took 2 steps, Groot suddenly discovered this problem. However, he was only stunned for a moment before his well-tempered body reacted naturally. The next sword light had already shot out. Swoosh! This sword light was still aimed at the dream demon, and in a flash, it tore its body apart. Groot once again sheathed his sword, his eyes squinting. The purple smoke that covered the entire area was obviously released by the dream demon. It could clearly feel its movement speed being restricted, but its attack speed did not change at all. It had never seen such a strange ability in its life. But no matter how strange the ability was, as long as it had a sword in its hand, it had nothing to fear. Groot suddenly felt something churning in his mind. A few fragmented images suddenly appeared, almost overlapping with the current situation. This caused his eyes to be filled with blood. His 5 fingers grabbing onto the sword hilt suddenly exerted strength. The thirst that emerged from the depths of his soul became more and more serious. Suddenly, it covered its forehead, its shoulders trembling uncontrollably, and it couldn't help but let out a low growl. Just at that moment, smoke surged behind its back. Sharp claws silently appeared, viciously swiping towards its back. Under normal circumstances, Groot would have sensed the movement of the smoke, and instantly brandished his sword to slash the sneak attacker in half. But its current state was obviously not right. It was actually struck by the claw. On the high platform, Dake did not feel any joy from the dream demon's attack, because that claw did not seem to have any effect. Even with the dream demon's 2,500 points of attack, it was actually unable to break through its defense. After its attack was ineffective, it immediately fled, once again disappearing into the purple smoke. Let me do it. The Diru beast lightly stroked its holy sword, and muttered. Dake slightly muttered, and nodded in agreement. Although the Diru beast was only a 4-star magic guide sprite, but with the holy ring and single scabbard, it could raise its attack to 3,600 points. Even if this orc sword saint was a third-tier magic guide sprite, it could still barely deal with it. Moreover, in this nightmare realm, the Diru beast's speed was probably faster than the orc sword saint's. The only problem was its speed would also be reduced, and it might not be able to dodge the sword slash of the orc sword saint. The nightmare realm not only restricted the orc sword saint, it also restricted the Diru beast. Under the circumstances where the dream demon was unable to deal any damage to the orc sword saint, the nightmare realm might even become an obstacle to attacking the boss. But under the current circumstances, it was still inconvenient to remove it. At least, he had to investigate the strength of this boss before considering. While Dake was calmly pondering, the Diru beast had already lightly leapt down from the high platform. The moment it landed, it leapt forward, dragging its sword as it galloped. Suddenly, the dream demon's chuckle resounded in the air. The Diru beast's seemingly fast but actually slow body suddenly split into three, charging towards the orc sword saint from three different directions. While running, the single scabbard contained a brilliance. Its divine power was not ostentatious, but the unique aura of the holy sword, in the eyes of the holy sword holder, was like a firefly in the dark night. The entrance of the Diru beast caused a huge shock to the orc sword saint's spirit. He fiercely raised his head. His two vertical pupils were already filled with blood red. When his rationality was drowned out by his instincts, the sword in the orc sword saint's hand became even more thirsty. He stood motionless in his original position, but his sword-wielding posture had changed. Fragments of memories returned, causing his sword-wielding posture to become even more perfect. The details of exerting strength had also improved by leaps and bounds. At this moment he once again slashed out horizontally. The blood-red sword aura that shot out from the sword blade was larger and longer than before, covering a larger area. The three Diru beasts that were galloping in front were suddenly sliced in half by the sword aura. The orc sword saint's eyes flashed, the sword in his hand thrusting to the side. Clang! Two holy swords crossed the river of time, colliding for the first time. With the assistance of the dream demon, the Diru beast that had completely concealed its body immediately held its wrist and retreated. In that instant of collision, the single scabbard in its hand was almost shaken off. The disparity in strength between both sides was vividly displayed at that moment. In addition, when a boss was born, its vitality was much higher than ordinary monsters. This 10th floor's boss definitely wasn't something it could deal with alone. The Diru beast wasn't blinded by its innate pride. It was extremely clear that it wasn't strong at all. Even if an enchanted fairy possessed intelligence, it was still unable to rely on itself to break through its shackles and display strength beyond its limits. But it had a master, and the deep bond between them would allow it to become stronger and faster. The Diru beast's eyes were cold. It once again entered the purple mist, disappearing from the orc sword saint's vision. Groot Delis abruptly turned his head. The surrounding purple mist caused him to feel abnormally vexed. It suddenly opened its bloody mouth in front of it, inhaled sharply, and then spat it out. Following the blood-red aura condensing in his mouth, a revolving blood-red ball was spat out. That blood-red ball instantly exploded in mid-air. A terrifying shockwave rapidly diffused in all directions, finally dispersing the purple mist. But the effects of the nightmare realm did not disappear because of the mist. For this stage, the purple smoke was nothing more than a special effect. The Diru beast was still nowhere to be seen. Groot Delis opened his eyes wide, releasing a hoarse roar. He was extremely sensitive to killing intent and malicious intent. Once the Diru beast approached him, it would be impossible to hide from his keen senses. But if the Diru beast continued to wander outside, it wouldn't be easy to capture it. The situation in front of him was so familiar, it caused Groot's head to swell with pain. Fragmented images once again drilled into his mind. It was still his past experience, causing him to slowly raise the holy sword in his hand. He didn't know the name of the holy sword in his hand. This holy sword wasn't his past sword. When he awakened, this holy sword was already soaked in a pool of blood-red liquid. But this didn't hinder him from controlling the holy sword and activating the hidden strength of the holy sword on the spot. Blood River Sacred Domain. Groot also raised his other hand and grabbed the hilt of the sword. He held the holy sword vertically in the center of his field of vision, and then let out a fierce shout. Instantly, a sea of blood light gushed out from the holy sword. The holy aura of the holy sword also suddenly erupted. The surrounding space began to strangely distort. The dream demon suddenly appeared beside Dake, letting out a hurried cry. Dake's expression became serious. Is it a blood realm type of field skill? Using a field skill to expel or cover a field skill was a necessary skill for a mature magus. Although Groot wasn't a magus, he could borrow the power of the Holy Sword of Blood in his hand to unleash a field skill. Although this field skill wasn't necessarily higher in level than the Nightmare Realm, Groot himself was much stronger than the Dream Demon. The Blood River Sacred Domain seemed to be overwhelming as it broke the Nightmare Realm open from the middle. Demonic Mimi. The Dream Demon's cry became more urgent, trying to maintain the existence of the Nightmare Realm with all its might. But its disadvantage was too great. It was gradually stretched, distorted, and penetrated. The scene instantly went out of control. The Diru Beast's figure was also exposed, staring at the Holy Sword in Groot's hand. The Holy Sword of Blood emitted a bloody aura that was incompatible with the Holy Aura, but they were extremely contradictory when they fused together. It instantly made it associate the Mad Lion with the Holy Sword. However, there was an absolute difference between the two. The Diru Beast couldn't understand the difference, but no matter which one it was extremely disgusted. Evil attribute, darkness attribute, blood and demons, it was all rejected from its body. Single sword scabbard. It lightly tapped the sword in its hand. The single sword scabbard's body instantly erupted with an incomparably pure holy aura, contrasting with the turbid, holy sword of blood. The blood waves of the Blood River Sacred Domain broke through the Nightmare Realm, gushing towards it. But it was immediately repelled by the holy aura of the single sword scabbard. The Diru Beast's expression was solemn. It suddenly turned towards its master on the high platform. As if its heart felt something, Dake simultaneously looked towards it. The thoughts of the Magus and the Magus Fairy were synchronized. The power called fetters rippled. It's time. It's time. The Diru Beast suddenly raised the holy sword. Dake placed Pride horizontally in front of it. In the name of Dake Dimung Magus Summoning, a dark golden radiance illuminated the field like the scorching sun. On the forehead of the Diru Beast, a golden red Pride emblem appeared. A powerful soul energy converged within the emblem. Its body turned into light in an instant. When the radiance of Pride sprinkled down, that rat monster without a tail suddenly turned back, quietly drilling out from the shadows with its eyes and nose, its pupils constantly dilating. Its soul was affected by the light of Pride, and a feeling that it had never felt since it was born came out from the depths of its heart. All kinds of thoughts that it didn't even dare to think about in the past flooded into its mind at this moment. It looked at the Diru Beast that had turned into a glowing object, looked at Groot who was holding the Holy Sword of Blood with both hands, and looked at the human youth who looked like a god under the illumination of the magic card on the high platform. A seed in the depths of its heart secretly sprouted. Why? Why can we only hide underground, unable to see the light? Dake didn't notice the rat monster's head poking out from the shadows. He also didn't think that just a little bit of Pride's radiance would have such an impact on a monster's life. His gaze was more focused on the Diru Beast, on the Beastman Sword Saint. Groot Dulles was originally an extremely arrogant person. Even though he was only a shell that manifested from the underground city, his nature continued. The radiance of pride shone on his body, causing the arrogance in his heart to rise up. The bloody radiance in his eyes became even more intense. Boom! Following the sound of an explosion, the Nightmare Realm was completely shattered. The Holy Realm of Blood was like a terrifying flood that broke through a dam. In an instant, it violently surged towards the walls, causing half of the hall to be covered in bloody radiance. Dake's high platform was also affected. He suddenly clutched his heart, only to feel his heart beating faster and his blood flow faster. He became even more irritable and explosive. This earth technique. Dake couldn't help but think of Tom Nixon, thought of Ophelia Bullard, thought of the vampires and the Fresh Blood tribe. This must be an earth technique that was very compatible with their strength. In the holy realm of blood, the beast-man sword saint's blood was boiling. His strength skyrocketed as he roared and charged towards the Diru beast. Without the obstruction of the nightmare realm, his speed was terrifyingly fast. Dake only saw a blur in front of his eyes. He saw the beast-man sword saint's holy sword piercing towards the Diru beast that was still shrouded in the radiance of evolution. No, it was already the fairy beast. Meow. Ha. Suddenly, a delicate shout was heard. The fairy beast completed her evolution at the crucial moment. From the white radiance, her pink and white right arm was wrapped around by a pink and purple ribbon. The single scabbard, that was emitting a pure white radiance, was held tightly by her 5 fingers. The 2 holy swords collided once again. The bloody radiance and the white radiance seemed like they were going to split the world in half. The fairy beast suddenly spread out her 6 flawless white angelic wings. An incomparably pure holy aura combined with the holy aura of the single scabbard, purifying the blood around her. Roar! Seeing that the Diru beast had evolved into an even more powerful fairy beast, Groot Dulles was not shocked. Instead, he was happy. The hunger in his eyes was no longer hidden. He stared greedily at the fairy beast's delicate white flesh. Fight! It let out a roar, and the holy sword in its hand suddenly turned around. Almost instinctively, it used an extremely high level of technique to press down the blade of the single scabbard. Then, its bulging right arm violently pushed forward, causing the holy sword of blood to thrust forward rapidly. The fairy beast was alarmed. She reacted quickly and bent back. The holy sword of blood pierced through the canyon and pierced through her face. Just the sharpness of the sword made her face hurt. Before Groot could change his move, the fairy beast moved her feet and quickly retreated. Finally, she pulled away from Groot. Under the bloody radiance, the fairy beast spread her 6 wings and flew into the air. Her face under the cross-shaped mask was unusually serious. She had a graceful figure and wore a pair of snow-white high heels. On the left side of her body, she wore tight-fitting white socks and long gloves. On her ankle was the holy ring that symbolized holy. With the holy ring as support, her 3 measurements, which were originally 3500/3600/2000, were increased by 500 points. Now, she had reached a height of 4000/4100/2500. With these 3 measurements, she would not be at a disadvantage even against a 9-star magic guide elf. Moreover, she had the holy sword in her hand. Of course, her opponent also had the holy sword. Groot was even more excited after forcing the fairy beast to retreat. He raised the holy sword of blood. The slow-moving bloody radiance rushed into the sky under his control and rushed toward the fairy beast like a tsunami. In the next moment, his figure disappeared at the same time. He chased after the bloody radiance. With a flick of his finger, a bloody red sword radiance shot out. There was a bloody wave above and a sword radiance below. This time, the fairy lady beast did not retreat. She raised the holy sword and drew a circle in the air. Then, she aimed at the center of the circle and suddenly pierced it, as though she was shooting a holy arrow. A beam of holy light shot out from the sword. The divine light exploded in the air, instantly dispersing the oncoming blood tide. Then, she followed up with a downward slash, shattering the sword radiance shot out by Groot. All of this took a long time to describe, but it happened in the blink of an eye. After dealing with the threat, the fairy beast dived down without hesitation. Her whole body was full of vigor as she swung her sword. Both sides clashed on the ground again. The sound of swords clashing almost became a chain, and did not stop. On the high platform, Dake had already summoned illusory fantasy beast, Ivan again. At the same time he had an additional, Pride 3.0 in his hand. His speed was extremely fast, and in a mere 3 seconds, this new Pride 2 was activated. Ivan rose from 1 star to 2 stars, and at the same time he obtained a light-type field skill. Great Sunny Day Pride. Use Great Sunny Day. Even before Dake gave the complete order, Ivan had already raised his head and released the power of the sun. A blazing ball of light like the sun quickly rose up like a sunrise, bringing new light to the whole world. Under the illumination of this light, the smell of blood in the field suddenly became much fainter. Although the blood sanctuary was not dispelled, the effects of Great Sunny Day were not hindered either. Within 5 rounds of 2 minutes and 30 seconds, the power of the light-type ultimate skills would be increased by 50%. Bathed in the sunlight. Although the fairy beast did not obtain any substantial increase in her 3 attributes, her essence, energy, and spirit were clearly more abundant. She was like a fish in water, her reaction was faster, and her condition was better. With a soft cry, she suddenly pushed Groot back and quickly condensed a holy bow in her left hand. Not only did Great Sunny Day significantly increase the power of the light-type ultimate skills, but it also allowed the light-type energy to gather faster, making casting smoother and faster. Therefore, in just 3 seconds, the fairy beast pulled the bowstring at an extremely close distance, and an electric arrow emitting lightning condensed between her 2 fingers. Heavenly punishment. Accompanied by the roar of thunder, the electric arrow shot out. Although it did not accelerate to its peak in such a short distance, the power of this arrow was not above the power of this arrow. After shooting the electric arrow, the fairy beast rushed forward with her sword, and a terrifying storm wrapped around the holy sword in her right hand. She had performed sword dance in this short moment. Duong. Groot quickly swung his sword to block, and actually blocked the electric arrow. However, the lightning that exploded on the sword instantly spread to Groot's arm, and the paralysis effect was indeed produced. The fairy beast closed in like a gust of wind, and a sword dance, slash with a gale. Roar. Half of Groot's body was paralyzed, and he could not wield his sword for a short period of time. He could only raise his left arm to block at the critical moment. That left arm that was covered with a vambrace was completely unable to resist the power of the sword dance, and it was instantly cut off and sent flying. Groot woke up for a moment amidst the severe pain, and his completely suppressed rationality forced him to raise his head. He suddenly turned his head to look at his left arm that had been sent flying. A sharp pain came from his brain, and a familiar scene appeared again. That was the first time he had joined the Orc army and participated in the defense of the Orc kingdom against the demon invaders. Not long ago, he had shaken the Orc kingdom with the title of Sword Saint, and after joining the army, he was surrounded by everyone. He enjoyed special treatment and felt at ease because he was bound to go to the front line and make a great contribution to the kingdom. If he had not rashly attacked the demon army's position and been surrounded and killed by the demon powerhouses who were deeply hidden, even until his death, Groot still couldn't figure out why those demons, who weren't any weaker than him, would do such a dishonorable thing. Did they not have the dignity of a powerhouse? When his right arm holding the sword was clamped, Groot could only use his left arm to block the fatal blow from his left. Then his left arm was cut off and sent flying just like now. When Groot came back to his senses, he had subconsciously completed more than 10 blocks. His gaze slowly fell on the fairy beast's body. Memories flooded into his brain like a tide. Angel! He could not help but let out a surprised voice. But in the ears of Dake and the Diru beast, it was just a meaningless roar. As an Orc sword saint who had fallen 100 years ago, Groot's understanding of magical technology was very limited. At that time, even with the little magical technology that he had, he could not create such a powerful magical fairy. Groot passively endured the fairy beast's continuous attacks, and his gaze could not help but look at the few shadows left in the corner. The mouse demon that had not really attracted his attention until now was peeping with half of its head. Groot's memory gradually recovered. Although it was only a small part, the order gradually became clearer. This made him finally realize how incredible the existence of that mouse was. In this special dungeon, all the magical beasts were virtual shells created by the dungeon. The difference between ordinary demons and elite demons, and even bosses, was only the amount of material that was filled into the virtual shell. But even for bosses, under normal circumstances, only a little coating was applied on the inner side of the virtual shell. But that mouse seemed to be filled with paint, as if it was emitting colors from the inside out. Groot had the self-awareness of a boss. He was very rational, and knew that the memories that were constantly being poured into his brain belonged to another person. Although he was also Groot-Delis, he was not Groot-Delis. But as the virtual shell was gradually filled with paint, Groot Delis would become Groot Delis. Groot did not reject this point. In fact, he even longed for it. Just like how he longed for blood, longed for battle, longed for victory. Yes, he finally understood what he needed. He needed a victory. A victory that could wash away the humiliation he suffered when he died. The one who can summon an angel. Is it the Holy Son of the human church? Groot glanced at the golden-haired youth on the high platform from the corner of his eye, and his heart was in turmoil. He did not know how many years had passed since he died. But since the humans were still here, the church was still here, and the Holy Son was still here, then the demons had not completed their war goal of conquering the entire continent. The war might still be going on, and the Orc Kingdom might still be struggling to survive. He would walk out of this underground city, not as a demon but as an orc, and enter the battlefield again. This time, he would not lose. Bam! His thoughts returned to reality. The collision between Holy Sword and Holy Sword produced a horrifying energy tide. The fairy beast suddenly realized that the Orc Sword Saint's aura had undergone a huge change, as if he had turned from a jackal to a leopard. The Holy Sword, in the orc's hand, even emitted a buzzing sound as if it was resonating with the sword. The fairy beast's expression changed slightly, and dense purple light suddenly appeared in her right hand that was holding the sword. Heaven purple light. The heaven purple light, that was supposed to shoot out like a light cannon, was deliberately compressed in her right hand. It wound around the sword hilt and merged perfectly with the sword. Although it could not last for long, it gave the holy sword a stronger characteristic. The 5 rounds were too short, and the sun in the sky was about to fall. The fairy beast unleashed her strongest power at this moment, and the first strike forced the Orc Sword Saint, who had just regained his senses, to take a few steps back. The second strike was enhanced by the double slash. After the power of this sure kill skill fused with the heaven purple light, it produced a surpassing effect. The Orc Sword Saint, who only had his right arm left, finally could not block it and was sent flying by this strike. His body soared into the air, and his 5 fingers gripped the sword hilt like iron. The blood-red light on the ground surged up like a tide and caught him in the air. However, the 6-winged angel chased after him, and did not give him a chance to breathe. Blood Burial. A name appeared in Groot's throat instinctively. His body did not need to adapt at all, as it moved according to the memory of his cells. The Blood Holy Sword danced crazily. The entire Blood River Sacred Realm was activated, and the red liquid all over the palace was suddenly sucked up and gathered crazily on the sword. A boiling ball of blood appeared at the tip of the sword and suddenly exploded. Boom. It was like a flower blooming. Countless threads burst out from the center of the ball of blood, and instantly covered the entire field of vision. The fairy beast charged forward, and her 6 wings flapped rapidly as she sped up. The last energy of the heaven purple light was gathered on the Sword Saint's single sword scabbard, and the sure kill skill triple slash was in place. Its gaze didn't even glance at those strands of blood. Its entire body was indomitable, like a celestial flying from the heavens, and its sword flew out. Dake saw the exploding blood threads from Blood Burial devouring the fairy beast like a giant mouth from the abyss. However, as soon as the explosion sounded, the fairy beast had already broken through Blood Burial's encirclement and stabbed the sword into the Orc Sword Saint's body. A terrifying tide of energy was injected into Groot's body along with the sword. He opened his mouth and looked down at the single sword scabbard, and a strange expression appeared on his face. It was unknown whether it was relief or regret. The next moment, the energy of the heaven purple light and triple slash completely exploded in the Orc Sword Saint's body. Boom. It was torn apart. The holy sword of blood was blasted into the sky. The fairy beast was covered in blood and wounds. Blood Burial did not miss, and it almost died. The Orc Sword Saint's corpse fell to the ground. The tide of blood on the ground had completely receded, and the red liquid between the stone slabs had also dried up. The fairy beast landed on the ground and held the single sword scabbard horizontally in the air, barely standing. She panted as she looked at the Orc Sword Saint's corpse. After confirming that it could not jump up again, she heaved a sigh of relief. Dake quickly jumped down from the platform and quickly walked over to support her. The fairy beast degenerated into a Diru beast at that moment and lay on Dake's arm. Dake quickly squatted down and stroked its head, praising it. Meeb, the degenerated dream demon, flew down from the sky, and the holy sword of blood was clamped down by her telekinesis and floated behind her. Little Devil Ivan, the spirit illusion bug, and the lion beast also came over. If this orc sword saint was the final boss, then the battle was already over. Little Devil? Little Dream Demon suddenly turned her head and looked curiously at the orc sword saint's corpse. Then, as if chasing a mosquito, her gaze wandered to the shadows in the corner. The mouse was curiously stared at by Little Dream Demon, and its body trembled and its face stiffened. It was as if a cat had caught it stealing peanuts, and its forehead was covered in sweat. It carefully held the small bottle in its arms bit by bit. Then it suddenly dived into the shadows and fled quickly. Omega? Little Dream Demon tilted her head with a dazed expression. Let's rest here for now. Dake sat down and hugged the Diru beast between his legs, and let out a sigh of relief. In fact, this boss gave him a very bad feeling. It was not because it was very, very strong. Instead, he sensed something else from the boss of this level. Just like the humanoid demon with the broadsword, this boss clearly had a rationality that the demons of the underworld should not have. Because he had a magic guide fairy, he was very sensitive to this. In terms of the research of magic guide fairies' intelligence, he had already walked ahead of most magisters. Just from a few extremely small actions, he could feel the difference. Moreover, in the battle between the Orc Sword Saint and the Diru Beast, there were many times when the Orc Sword Saint did things that demons should not do. For example, suddenly covering his head, being distracted in battle, and clearly changing and strengthening his sword skills. There were many possible explanations for this. The laziest explanation was that it was a coincidence and a misunderstanding. After all, overinterpreting was a human specialty. But for the experienced Dake, after seeing this, the first thing he would think was that the demons were like his magic guide fairy and had developed intelligence. Normal humans in this world would not think about it, and they would not even think about it. But Dake Dimming was different. His thinking was not nailed down by so-called common sense. Perhaps I should talk to the professors? Dake suddenly realized that he had developed this bad habit. If there was something he could not decide, he would talk to the professors. Even though he was consciously avoiding it, it did not seem to have any effect. Tisk! Dake subconsciously rubbed the Diru Beast's belly, while raising his other hand and waving at the Dream Demon. Little Dream Demon dragged the holy sword of blood over in a wobbly manner. Even without using the Eye of Truth, Dake knew that the holy sword of blood was not cheap, and compared to the rusty holy sword that was refined into the single sword scabbard, this holy sword was stronger in both appearance and performance. I just don't know if its value in the Eye of Truth will be higher than the magic fire, magic book, and the blood crystal crown. With a trace of curiosity, Dake opened the Eye of Truth. From the hilt to the tip, the holy sword of blood was engraved with extremely complicated patterns. The patterns on the sword were like a blood groove that went from the tip to the end of the sword like a charm. When the Orc Sword Saint activated the hidden power of the holy sword of blood, the extremely long blood tide would be filled with flowing blood. He did not know if it was the manifestation of magic power or the blood of the Orc Sword Saint. At the bottom of the hilt, there was an ancient word blood engraved. A holy sword that can control the power of blood. Value. Higher than trash slime. Higher than Hawkman wrestling. Lower than Ball Sea Lion? Although Dake had never said it, Hawkman wrestling was the second lowest among his magic guide spirits in the Eye of Truth, and its value was only higher than trash slime. In order to protect Hawkman wrestling's dignity, he had secretly sworn to seal this information forever. Of course, he did not know why a 3-star Hawkman wrestling was lower than a 2-star Ball Sea Lion. It was even lower than the other 1-star magic guide spirits. It could only be said that this was the Eye of Truth's measurement standard. But to be able to be higher than Hawkman wrestling, this holy sword of blood is indeed a treasure. The only downside is that its attributes are not very good. A holy sword that can control the power of blood is not suitable for lion beasts or Dilu beasts. It is impossible for Yaga beasts to be a match for it. I'm afraid that only the mad lion beasts are slightly compatible with it. To be honest, the most suitable spirit for this, holy sword of blood, is white Gouda. Since it has the blood attribute, and is a holy sword, it is suitable for both the blood tribe and the hero bloodlines. I wonder what White obtained in his first adventure in the dungeon. As a hero's son, can he feel the calling of the holy sword? If he can find a more useful holy sword, I don't mind swapping it with him. Although Dake said so, he felt that his idea was a little unrealistic. The probability of White finding a holy sword was like winning the lottery. TSK, maybe he could really win? If it was steel holy sword, rock holy sword, grass holy sword, or even water holy sword. Of course, it would be best if it was light holy sword, or dragon holy sword. Dake was full of anticipation as he rested for a while. Then he pinched Dilubeast's cheeks and said softly, "Sleep for a while?" Dilubeast's ears perked up, and it immediately jumped up with a, "I'm in a good state and don't need to rest at all" look. Dake patted his butt and stood up as well. Next, he had to enter the final room. Maybe there were treasure chests left behind? Good evening. I've finally finished writing this chapter. After writing for a long time, it's still a 10,000-word chapter. It's equivalent to 5 chapters of other books. Oh, brothers and sisters with monthly votes, please vote. 217/233. Chapter 590. The lion beast was in front, the Dilu beast was next to it, the illusion bug was on top, and the little demon beast was on the shoulder. Ivan and the dream demon were also following behind. Dake entered the last passage and slowly walked towards the final room. Because he didn't think that the monster with the holy sword wouldn't be a boss, he was quite relaxed. Not long after, the group passed through the passage and arrived at the final room. As expected, the room was very quiet. The first thing that entered their eyes was the red pool on the opposite wall, followed by the thick chains on both sides of the wall. The marks left on the wall were very obvious. It was easy to imagine that someone had been tied up here for a long time, and had only just woken up today. Looking at the two sides, there were all kinds of things scattered around, but they were all covered by black cloth and covered in a thick layer of dust. Further up, there were many pipes that extended from all directions, and some of them were no longer flowing with liquid. The room wasn't very spacious, and it was about the same size as a normal classroom in the Shungmalian Academy. There was nothing special about the structure of the room, other than the lack of iron bars. It was like a prison. The website was https://m. But can't you? VIP, it should be here. Dake took a deep breath and said, "Look around and see if there are any fish that escaped the net." Apart from the Dilu beast, the other magic guide fairies scattered. Dark walked to the side of the pool and lowered his head to look at the red liquid that had been refilled. The red liquid looked like blood and even gave off a bloody smell, but for some reason, he felt that it wasn't water. This feeling was very strange. It was like looking at water that wasn't water, or looking at flowers that weren't flowers. If one were to use a metaphor that was close enough, it would be drawn. Basically, this was the special product of the dungeon. It didn't have much research value, and it was like the bricks on the walls of the dungeon. It was a building or decoration of the dungeon. Even if it was brought out of the dungeon, it would disappear with the passage of time. Found the treasure chest. The little demon beast's excited voice suddenly came from the corner of the room. It was obviously yelling on purpose. The little dream demon, who had failed in the treasure hunt, was so angry that she puffed up her cheeks and circled around it. Dake immediately walked over. The huge treasure chest that was half the height of a person was hidden under the black cloth. Because the entire color of the chest was gray, it was not conspicuous. "Let me do it." The Dilu beast suddenly stepped out and stared at the treasure chest with bright eyes. Dake nodded. All right. This time, the tier boss was basically dealt with by the Diru beast alone, so it should be the one to reap the rewards. The Diru beast's expression became serious. It slowly pulled out the sword from its scabbard, and then aimed at the fist-sized iron chain. The iron chain beside it and chopped down. Clang. The iron chain was cut cleanly. It used the tip of its sword to pry open the rusty iron chain. Then, it placed the scabbard in the air, bent down slightly, grabbed the lid of the treasure chest, and opened it without hesitation. The enchanted elf was not afraid of death, nor was it afraid of the traps that might be hidden in the treasure chest. However, when the lid was lifted, what came out of it was not poisonous fog, hidden arrows, or other traps, but dust. Cough, cough, cough. The Diru beast quickly covered its nose and mouth, and quickly retreated. The little demon beast's clam's mocking laughter came from the air. The atmosphere eased up in an instant. When the dust settled, Dake saw the item in the treasure chest. It was a sword lying quietly on a red velvet cloth. Without the obstruction of the treasure chest, the sword's aura spread out without restraint. Whether it was the Diru beast or the lion beast, they couldn't help showing an extremely shocked expression. Dake glanced at their faces and immediately realized something. He subconsciously said, "Holy sword." The lion beast excitedly said, "Yes, meow." Dake. The Diru beast couldn't help rolling its eyes. Stealing my character settings? Dake would never have thought that a holy sword would come out of the treasure chest. This was because he had already obtained a holy sword from the Beastman Sword Saint. Originally, a holy sword was something that could only be found by chance. To be able to obtain a holy sword in the 10th floor of the dungeon was already an incredible matter. Who would have thought that it would be a double yoke? If it was someone else, they would be immersed in the joy of obtaining a double yoke. However, Dake wasn't like that. He began to think about the possibility of this happening, and connected all the suspicious points. However, he finally came to a conclusion. Out of the two holy swords, one of them was very likely not from the dungeon. The feeling that this matter gave him was like the plot of a story. Someone purposely buried a treasure in the labyrinth, and then released a treasure map called Information, leading the protagonist step by step into the labyrinth to accept a test. Once he passed the test, he would be awarded the treasure. If this person was the main character of the original game, Victor, then based on the compatibility of the Holy Sword of Blood with him, it was very likely that the Holy Sword of Blood was purposely placed in the buried city. However, in reality, the protagonist in this story wasn't White, but Dake Dimung. The Holy Sword of Blood was only a high-level weapon to Dake, who didn't have the hero's bloodline. It wasn't worth more than what was necessary. So where did this incident go wrong? Dake couldn't help but ponder. The incident involving the dungeon couldn't be deduced using the plot of Harry Potter that he was familiar with. Even if the original game plagiarized parts of Harry Potter, there were definitely original parts. If this entire plot was part of the original plot in the original game, then according to the usual plot, the original protagonist would be the core. The person who should have obtained the Holy Sword of Blood should have been White Gouda. But now there was a problem in this incident. In the end, the person who defeated the boss and obtained the Holy Sword of Blood was Dake Dimung, and not White Gouda. So where did it go wrong? Could it be that someone thought that I had the hero's qualifications? This isn't something to laugh about. Thinking about this, Dake wanted to laugh, and he did laugh out loud. But after laughing for a while, he couldn't laugh anymore. Because beside him, there were two heroes' qualifications magic elf standing beside the assassin. He couldn't help but look at the Diru beast and lion beast, who were staring at the holy sword in the treasure chest, and his expression froze. This is indeed easy to cause misunderstandings. Meow? The Diru beast turned its head and pointed at the holy sword in the treasure chest. Even though it didn't directly say it, it obviously wanted to take the sword. Dake restrained his thoughts and nodded. Take it. The Diru beast immediately stretched its upper body into the treasure chest and grabbed the hilt of the holy sword. Then it stepped back and took it out. The shape of this holy sword was very unique. The hilt was an oval structure that was hollowed out in the middle, and one could reach their fingers into it to hold the hilt. There was no obvious protrusion between the hilt and the sword body, nor was there a sword guard. Passing one's hand through the hole in the hilt, it was like holding a spear. The back of the sword was slightly curved from the hilt to the tip of the sword, and the blade on the other side was even more curved. This made the entire sword look like a sniper rifle. But its most obvious characteristic wasn't its unique shape, but its jade-like material. If not for the fact that the Diru beast and lion beast were very sure that they smelled the aura of the holy sword on it, Dake would definitely treat it as a jade statue, which was purely an ornament, because it looked very brittle. I really can't imagine that this is actually a sword used to kill enemies. Dake stretched out his finger and gently stroked the sword. He immediately felt a jade-like lubrication. He couldn't help but ask, "Diru beast, do you feel anything?" The Diru beast's expression was solemn as it said, "I can try." "Then try." Dake immediately moved out of the way. The Diru beast took 2 steps forward and held the holy emerald sword horizontally like a spear, aiming it at the pool. Then it began to pour its magic into the holy emerald sword. As its magic was quickly drained, the sword body of the holy emerald sword began to emit a faint green light. The Diru beast could clearly feel that its magic was being absorbed and transformed into a completely different nature. The entire process of energy transformation wasn't fast. It silently counted until it reached 30. Then, the green light on the sword body suddenly brightened. From the hilt to the tip of the sword, a clear line appeared. The green light was instantly transmitted from the hilt to the tip of the sword, and a blazing ball of light quickly condensed. The Diru beast subconsciously held the sword with both hands. The ball of light suddenly turned into a beam and shot towards the pool. Pung! The white beam of light with green edges shot into the pool like a cannon. With a loud explosion, the red liquid in the pool rushed to the ceiling. The extremely high temperature caused the entire pool to boil. Steam and blood mist instantly rushed out, and the heat continued to spread. Dake, who witnessed this scene, couldn't help but open his eyes wide. The other magic elf's eyes also twitched. They were shocked by the way the holy emerald sword was used. A long-range holy emerald sword? Dake couldn't help but ask. The Diru beast nodded slightly, raised the holy emerald sword, and said, "It looks like it. Moreover, this should be a grass-type holy emerald sword, but it can also absorb light-type energy." Dake's mind spun, and it immediately said, "Sunlight beam?" Sunlight beam, also known as Sunlight Scorching Sun, was a grass-type skill with a power of 120 in the Pokemon game. Those who had watched the Pokemon anime would probably have a clear impression of Sunlight Scorching Flame. Diagram: the wonderful frog seed collected light through the scales on its back, and then shot out a powerful beam of light from the scales. The charging time was about 1 round. In great sunny or great sunny weather, there was no need to charge. In rain or sandstorm weather, the power would be reduced by half. If this holy emerald sword released a sure kill skill similar to Sunlight Beam, then the Diru beast that could charge it would be equivalent to obtaining a light cannon. However, sure kill skills with such power should have a long cooldown, and this holy emerald sword should be the same. And don't forget, it was a holy emerald sword. This Sunlight Beam's sure kill skill was just an additional skill. Apart from that, its value was already high enough. If it could be refined into a magic elf, Dake couldn't help but look at the single scabbard. After the success of the single scabbard, he had never stopped thinking about replicating it. The main reason why he felt regretful about the Blood Holy Sword was because there were no Pokemon with the Holy Sword skill related to the Blood attribute. The reason why he was able to successfully refine the single scabbard with the first Holy Sword he obtained was closely related to the sure kill skill called Holy Sword. In Dake's memory, there weren't many Pokemon with sure kill skills with the same name. Other than the single scabbard, there was only the Holy Sword Saint that appeared in the movie Shiram vs. Sword Saint, the legendary Pokemon Gopaluan, Dalakian, Bylidjan, and the fantasy Pokemon Kyludio. These 3 Pokemon were all very powerful. Among them, Kyludio was even a fantasy treasure Pokemon. Their attributes were steel, rock, grass, and water. In addition, in the Digimon, the Combat Tyrannosaurus, that evolved from the Sabegu, and the Steel Garuru, that evolved into the Omega Beast, could also be transformed into a holy sword called Omega Sword. However, the Omega Sword's strength was definitely much higher than that of the Holy Sword Saint. With Dake's current level, the success rate of refining the Omega Sword was basically 0. In fact, because the 4 Holy Sword Saint Pokemon were powerful individuals with extremely high race values, the success rate of refining the Omega Sword Saint was also very low. Once it was refined, it would probably be a 3rd-tier magic guide fairy. For a 3rd-tier magic guide fairy to transform into a sword form and let a 2nd-tier Dilu beast or lion beast control it, no matter how he thought about it, it was unrealistic. Therefore, Dake's thoughts were only at the stage of imagination. He also didn't expect that he would obtain 2 holy swords on his first official exploration of the Academy's dungeon. This was a plot that even a novel author wouldn't dare to write. I still have to think about it at length. Before I'm certain, I can't act rashly. Dake took a slight breath and said, "Let's look again and see if there are any other treasures." How could there only be one treasure chest in a boss room? There should at least be some other small things to set off the holy sword, right? Dake turned around and picked up the red velvet cloth from the treasure chest. After confirming that there was no hidden layer, he rubbed his eyes and looked at the emerald holy sword. His eyes turned golden as he activated Eye of Truth. The value of this holy sword doesn't seem to be much higher than the Holy Sword of Blood. The 2 of them should be weapons of the same grade, higher than the Hawkman wrestling, and lower than the Ball Sea Lion. If I can successfully refine it, I might be able to refine a Berigian. Dake picked up the red velvet cloth and threw it to the Dilu beast. Remember to wrap it. The Holy Sword of Blood and the Emerald Holy Sword didn't have scabbards, so it wasn't easy to carry them around. Dake wasn't prepared to directly take out these 2 holy swords and show them to others. However, since this Holy Sword of Blood was purposely lured by someone, then he wouldn't hide it. He would let the mastermind see that this holy sword was already in his hands. As for how to deal with the Holy Sword of Blood, Dake hadn't thought of it yet. He might casually refine it and try his luck, or he might really exchange it with White for a useful holy sword. If White had one. As for how to use it, he would leave it for the Basti Beast or the Vampire's Daughter to use. Although the Basti Beast and the Vampire's Daughter couldn't activate the Holy Sword's power, they might be able to activate the other half of the Blood's power. The Blood River Sacred Realm, released by the Orc Sword Saint, was indeed a decent field skill. While Dake was carefully calculating, the Little Demon Beast and the Little Dream Demon had already rushed out. Even Little Eevee was striding with its short legs to search. Although this room wasn't big, there were a lot of things. A few magic elves rummaged through the cabinets and finally gathered all the things that might be treasures. Dake opened his Eye of Truth and identified them one by one. He removed the parts that were obviously buildings or decorations, and then looked at the other gains. The Little Dream Demon proudly put down a small treasure chest, while the Little Demon Beast only threw down a few red crystals. Little Ivan, on the other hand, brought over a long box. Basically, only these 3 items showed enough value in the Eye of Truth. Dake first picked up the chest that had the highest chance of containing something good. This treasure chest was similar in size to the one that contained the crescent pendant. It looked like a jewelry box. There was no lock on the treasure chest. After unlocking the lock, the lid was opened. After seeing the treasures in the treasure chest, Dake raised his eyebrows in surprise. "What is it?" The Little Demon Beast flew to his shoulder and looked into the box with disdain. Dake smiled. "A key. Do you think this is the key to the door?" The Little Devil Beast immediately restrained its expression and said with an unhappy face, "Maybe." After discovering that she had found something good, the Dream Demon immediately became excited and floated around the Little Demon Beast. Squeak. Not to be outdone, Little Ivan immediately took out the long box that he had worked so hard to find. Dake rubbed its head and opened the box in his hand. On top of the yellow cloth, there was a scroll made of some unknown beast's skin. Dake's thoughts moved and he became interested. Scrolls from underground cities like this might not be able to increase one's battle strength, but they most likely had a special cultural value. He originally didn't have much interest in this, but after reading more and more books, he naturally developed some interest. But when he untied the rope on the scroll and took a closer look, he found that it was a map. The map wasn't very complicated and should be a simplified version. There were no special lines on the map. The only symbol was a hexagram on the top right corner of the map. Other than that, there was nothing else. Dake looked at the hexagram symbol, and then shook his head and put away the scroll. With his knowledge, he couldn't identify the location from a map. He also didn't know what the hexagram symbol was. It can't be a treasure map, right? The hexagram symbol is a treasure map. But I've never heard of a treasure map from underground cities. Dake was full of doubts and put the scroll back into the box. He opened the Eye of Truth, again to take a closer look. The value of the key was between the worm tree and the catgrass. This wasn't surprising. Even if it was the key to the underground city, its value wouldn't be too high. Basically, the key to the underground city was the same as the storage box. It was just a medium used to activate the mechanisms of the underground city, and didn't really have the ability to control space. As for the scroll that Ivan found, its value was lower than that of the insect tree, but the value of the scroll was mainly the map on it, and had nothing to do with the scroll itself. So the true value of these two treasures still needed to be appraised. Instead, the crystal that the little demon carried was no different from the blood crystals obtained from the blood frog army. There were a total of 5 blood crystals. Including the previous one, there were 6. Its value was between the worm tree and the catgrass. On the surface, if it wasn't for the emerald holy sword in the treasure box, the level boss this time could be said to be very poor. But a holy sword could be worth thousands of treasures. This was something that couldn't be lost. After Dake put these treasures into the bag that was getting bigger and bigger, he patted his cheeks and announced, "It's time to go." The room of the level boss wouldn't always exist. When the level boss was begged for food, the room would collapse and disappear in 10 minutes, or as long as 2 or 3 hours. Therefore, adventurers would quickly leave after plundering the treasures. Dake didn't want this fruitful night to turn into a sorry state because of the room's collapse. As for the other routes in this dungeon, he was no longer interested in exploring them. As the saying goes, enough is enough, and greed is like a snake trying to swallow an elephant. He had worked hard enough tonight, and the magic elves were tired. It was time to stop. In order to speed up, Dake put the dream demon and Ivan back into the magic card. As for himself, he used the flying spell to make it easier to fly over the red liquid. After spending 15 minutes, he finally left the level boss territory and passed through the stone door to land. After Dake landed, he turned to look at the huge stone door. A slight excitement that he hadn't felt until now suddenly drilled into his mind. All of a sudden, he seemed to have realized that in his first official adventure, he had single-handedly completed a tier boss raid. This was supposed to be an exciting event that was worth writing about. But now it had happened so naturally. That's it. Dake shook his head and turned to leave with the magic elves. If he was fast enough, he might be able to return to the safe zone before 11 o'clock. The 10th floor, the safe zone. There were very few students around the magic marker. When Dake quickly returned, he was puzzled to find that the seniors he had just met weren't here. Did they all go out? Dake frowned slightly. He looked at the few unfamiliar students and gave up on the idea of activating Paradise. He walked to the side of the magic marker and stepped over the circle of snake tongue flowers around the Medusa statue. He took out the key that he had found in the last room. The length of the key was between 10 to 15 centimeters. Its surface was grayish-white with a faint silver glow. It had the texture and weight of metal. If it was really a door key, there would be a reaction as long as it was near the magic marker. Dake was hopeful as he placed the key in front of the Medusa statue's chest. As the Medusa statue's magic made contact with the key emitted a special magic wave. Looks like it's the door key. Dake couldn't help but be delighted. Defeating a level boss was indeed a way to obtain the door key and door crystal. However, he was very lucky to be able to obtain the door key. He wondered which level this door key would lead to. I heard that the door key, obtained in the dungeon, points to the nearest few levels. The maximum level won't be more than 10. In other words, this door key will at most lead to the 1st or 19th level. Dake tried to infuse some mana into the door key, and the tip of the key rippled. As long as he infused more mana, it would activate. He pondered for a while and decisively infused more mana into it. The door key wasn't a one-way passageway. Instead of saying that it could teleport 3 people, it was more accurate to say that it could teleport 1 person 3 times. After using the door key, one could travel back and forth within a limited time. In order to know which level the door key would teleport to, one had to test it. 30 seconds later, a small magic circle appeared at the tip of the door key. The circle was about 50 centimeters long, and there were water-like ripples in the middle. When one put one's hand into the circle, one would feel a strong suction force. If one relaxed and didn't resist, one would be sucked into the circle. In the blink of an eye, one would appear at the level the door key pointed to. After the door key was activated, a corresponding circle would appear at the level it pointed to. Thus, there was no need to worry about bumping into people. They weren't stupid and would naturally avoid it. Moreover, the door key's teleportation point was at the edge of the magic marker, so the students would usually be a distance away from it. In the blink of an eye, Dake appeared on the other side of the door key. He subconsciously looked around and found that the magic guiding sprites hadn't followed him. Clearly, the magic guiding sprites were also considered individuals. Even the small spirit illusion worm couldn't teleport with him. This isn't a convenient setting. Dark grumbled as he started to search for the students. The magic marker next to him was a stone statue with a trident standing alone. This stone statue was over 3 meters tall, and the body of the trident was thicker than a fist. Probably because it was too late, there was no one around. There were only 2 tents set up a little distance away. Dake was considering whether or not to disturb someone's sleep when someone opened the tent and poked their head out. "Who is it? It's so late and you're still waking up. Isn't this Dake?" Tom Nixon opened his eyes and revealed a teasing smile. He was now a 4th-year student in the House of Fools, and was in the same alchemy class as Dake. Compared to the duel at Easter, the two were much more familiar with each other. When Dake saw him, he thought of the Holy Sword of Blood, and couldn't help but smile. "Good evening, Senior Nixon. You're not asleep yet?" Tom Nixon asked. "I'm about to sleep. Who did you come with?" "I remember that 2nd-year students have guides when they first enter the dungeon. I originally wanted to be White's guide, but it's a pity that the guide mission is for 3rd-year students." "No, I came alone." Time was limited, so Dake didn't want to make small talk. He quickly asked, "Can I ask which level this is?" Tom Nixon casually replied, "The 15th level." "Why?" Dake politely said, "So it's the 15th level? Thank you for telling me. I have to go back." Then he raised his hand and reached into the ring. His whole body was sucked into the ring. When he opened his eyes again, he was next to the magic marker on the 10th level. The 15th level wasn't a level that he could easily explore. It was slightly difficult. But after he left, Tom Nixon stared at the place where he disappeared and suddenly came back to his senses. "Alone? Then where did the key come from?" "Hey Tom, who's here?" His companion's voice came from the tent. Tom didn't hear him. Not long after Dake returned to the 10th level, the ring opened by the door key 1/5 gradually disappeared. He memorized the specific opening time, stepped over the snake truss flower, and found a place nearby to put down his backpack and pouch. He had accumulated too much. If he continued exploring tomorrow, he might need to summon more magic elves to carry them. After he put everything down, he suddenly felt relaxed. He sat on the ground and looked up at the high sky. After a long time, he came back to his senses. He took out a pen and paper from his backpack and started writing. While he was taking notes, the seniors who had disappeared all entered the safe zone. They found Dark's position in the safe zone, and the way they looked at him became more and more strange. But soon someone spoke up to remind them. Thus, everyone restrained their expressions and walked into the safety zone with a calm expression. Their representative, Lydia Emerson, walked to Dake and squatted down with a smile. "You're finally back. If you didn't come back, we would have gone out to look for you." "Is that so?" Dake turned around and smiled. "Do you still want to open the paradise?" "Of course." Lydia nodded and stood up. "I'll go ask the newcomers for their opinions." Then she quickly left. Dake shook his head and continued to write down and summarize. Lydia walked around and quickly came back. As I expected, no one would refuse a night with a roof and a bed in the dungeon. Okay then. Dake temporarily put away the notebook and took out the paradise. For him, it was a good thing to be able to open the paradise without any worries. Soon, residential buildings rose from the ground, and the 10th level of the safe zone was filled with a joyful atmosphere. If they didn't have to wake up early tomorrow, the group almost wanted to have a banquet here. Dake stayed in the haunted house, as usual. He summoned all the magic elves for some fresh air, and took the milk from Big Milk Can. Because he had the ultimate skill, drink milk. Big Milk can quickly produce a large amount of milk. Every person had a bottle of Dilu Beast, Lion Beast, Demon Fox Beast, and other magic elves that used up a lot of energy in today's adventure. Dake also opened a bottle. Then, everyone drank it ritualistically. The replenishment of magic was secondary, and the recovery of energy was the most important. Dake instantly felt that his energy had recovered a lot, and he was full of energy again. Because of this, he stayed up until 12 o'clock sharp before gradually falling asleep. Sunday, 6 o'clock in the morning. Dake slept for a full 6 hours before opening his eyes under the reminder of his biological clock. When he walked out of the haunted house, there were already many people outside. Lydia Emerson walked over from the side and said with a rosy face, "Good morning, Junior Dimming. Although I have a lot to say to you, I have to go now. I'll wait for you at the entrance of the 11th level until 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Don't be delayed by the treasure chests." After saying that, she winked and waved her hand to leave. Dake savored her gaze, and was about to return to the haunted house when Simon walked over with Bobby. Looking at the two of them, Dake suddenly thought of something and couldn't help but mutter. "Speaking of which, how are Deanna and Luo C?" "I seem to have said that I'll meet them on the 10th level. Forget it. The level boss has already been dealt with, so there's no point in meeting them. That's it." Therefore, he and Simon exchanged a few pleasantries and slipped into the haunted house under Simon's emphatic, "I'll wait until 8 o'clock" tone. Dake didn't recall the magic elves until he finished his breakfast of compressed biscuits. Then he cancelled the summoning of Paradise and set off. The high-intensity adventures over the past few days had actually accumulated a lot of fatigue. Even the large milk couldn't get rid of the tiredness in his mind. Therefore, when he set off again, he consciously slowed down. Thinking about it carefully, his goal of entering the dungeon had actually been exceeded. 2 official missions, Safety First and Door of Advancement. Safety First, S requirement of mana gathering was successfully completed, and he could start crafting the dungeon storage box I. Door of Advancement, S mission of dealing with the 10th level boss was completed directly. He only needed to submit the mission to receive the door key, 1/1, as a reward. With the door key, 1/1, and door key 1/5. His next exploration of the dungeon would be much more efficient. "I'm just missing the door key 1. If it's early, I can go to Traveler's Street to see if I can buy it." Even though the door key 1 wasn't cheap, Dake Dimming wasn't lacking in money. After he was some distance away from the safe zone, Dake thought about it and summoned the trash slime. Now he didn't need the holy sword, only the treasure chest. 3 greed cards were enough for him to only have a 15-minute gap in his treasure hunt. As for finding the entrance to the 11th level, as the entrance to the lower level of the dungeon would be reset every time it was refreshed, there were no specific coordinates. If he wanted to rely on his own ability to find the entrance, what he needed to do was to draw a map. By drawing all the paths along the way, he would be able to eliminate the impossible places and find the most probable places. Then he would be able to find the entrance more quickly and efficiently. As he went deeper into the dungeon, the situation would improve slightly. As the lower level's respawn interval was relatively longer, the map drawn by the scout would be useful. A portion of the students would sell such maps to earn academic credits. Some clubs would also share the maps. Dake searched for treasures while drawing the map according to the scale. The 10th level's area was relatively large. Even though he was confident, he might not be able to find the entrance before the evening. Luckily, after the Dilu Beast and the Lion Beast each had a holy sword, his team's strength had increased by a lot. The journey was quite smooth. It was just that the search for the treasure chest wasn't that smooth. After all, the treasure chest was a rare item. The larger the level's area, the more treasure chests would be distributed. Moreover, he had already found a treasure chest on the 10th level, outside of the boss instance dungeon. The probability of finding another one was even lower. Therefore, it wasn't until 2 hours after leaving the dungeon that Dake found a new treasure chest at around 9 o'clock. The treasure chest hidden in the pit made him speechless. If it wasn't for Greedy Slime 2, being very sure that there was a treasure chest in this area, he wouldn't have stepped on a trap that wasn't difficult to see through. Is this treasure chest that can only be found after falling into a trap for the protagonist? Dake used Flight Incantation to land at the bottom of the pit and opened the treasure chest. In the end, the treasure chest opened a magic item called Pearl of Perception. This pearl in the game had the attribute of Perception +1. Its value was similar to Crescent Pendant. The pearl was transparent, and there was a small spider-like bubble in the center. Using this Pearl of Perception seemed to make it easier to find traps, not to mention its value in the Eye of Truth. It was indeed a very useful treasure in an adventure. After opening the Pearl of Perception, it was even harder for Dake to find treasure chests. He wasn't too anxious and relied on Trash Slime to find a lot of materials that he needed to gather the quest. When it was close to noon, he had already completed a few quests and finally found a new treasure chest in a hidden room. Moreover, in the hidden room, there were 2 standard treasure chests that were stuck together. Dake gave the lion a look, and it opened the treasure chest on the left from the left to the right. As the lock was picked, the lid of the treasure chest instantly sprang open, and a treasure chest monster rushed out. A 10,000-word chapter is equivalent to 5 chapters in other books. Oh, I hope you know. I hope the monthly votes will be 5 times the amount. 220/233. Only 13 chapters left. Guaranteed monthly votes, guaranteed blade, automatic subscription, that you're tuning in to the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.